Early in the morning, police gathered in large numbers at a deserted reed field. Inside the cordoned-off area, the body of a high school girl was found under the river. Her body bore numerous scars, indicating she had been abused. Many officers coordinated efforts to search for clues around the area. There was something buried under the soil, yet somehow no one noticed it. Even so, the police quickly identified a suspect. The officer in charge of the case was Captain Kang from the Incheon Criminal Investigation Unit. The suspect looked gentle and didn't seem like a murderer at all. Just then, his daughter came home from school and witnessed the scene. The suspect reassured his daughter, telling her not to worry and that he would be back soon. The little girl nodded, trusting her father. No one could have imagined that the father would never return. During the trial, the judge declared him the perpetrator of the crime. The father was sentenced to death. Upon hearing this, he was stunned. He wondered what crime he had committed and why no one believed him. A few days earlier, on a stormy night, a luxury car stopped in the middle of a bridge. A man who appeared to be well-mannered stepped out of the vehicle. He placed an expensive watch into his pocket, but it accidentally fell without him noticing. Then the man opened the car door, dragged out a girl's body, and threw it into the fast-flowing river. 5 years later, the killer's watch was found by someone. That person put it up for auction at $400 million. Its luxurious appearance drew admiration from everyone. A handsome young man with a weary look also attended the auction. When no one could bid higher, he finalized the deal with an offer of $800 million. Naturally, the watch now belonged to the wealthy young man. The audience in the room applauded and congratulated him. He stood up and left coldly. In fact, he was Lieutenant Ji-hyeok. At that moment, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok arrived at the Incheon Police Department to assume his new post. The HR director introduced him to everyone in a flashy manner, but no one paid attention. They assumed that young people in high positions usually had connections backing them. The HR director privately told Captain Kang to keep an eye on the newcomer, because Lieutenant Ji-hyeok might be the one to succeed Captain Kang when he transferred to Seoul. Suddenly, the citizen complaint phone on Captain Kang's desk rang. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok was the one who picked it up. He received a report about a missing person. After that, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok went to meet the person who reported the case, a high school girl with a bold personality. She showed Lieutenant Ji-hyeok a photo of her missing friend. Besides that, she didn't say anything more. She suspected that Ji-hyeok was impersonating a police officer just because he was wearing an 800 million won watch. Later, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok took the girl to a 5-star hotel. She seemed extremely excited. It was only then that Ji-hyeok exposed her. In reality, she wasn't close enough to the missing person to go as far as filing a report. The girl just wanted to meet a cop for free food and drinks, which was why she didn't go to the police station to make an official statement. Upon hearing that, the girl stood up, intending to run away. But Lieutenant Ji-hyeok gave her a condition. If she could help him gather information about the missing person, she would get to eat and stay at the hotel for free for a whole month. Ji-hyeok worked as a cop for fun. He had nothing but money. At noon, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok returned to the police station. He investigated the victim in the missing person case and discovered she was the daughter of the man who had been convicted in the murder case involving the body dumped in the river 5 years ago. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok was watching a video of the suspect reenacting the crime scene, but something didn't feel right. The suspect appeared to be under police pressure, and he kept insisting on his innocence. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok suspected that there was something hidden in this case. Suddenly, the phone on Captain Kang's desk across from him rang. There was another report about a murder and a body being dumped. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok and Captain Kang immediately set off. On the way, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok told Captain Kang that he had actually received a similar report in the past. The location was exactly where the victim's body had been found in the case from 5 years ago. But when he arrived, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Someone was trying to toy with the police. Captain Kang wanted to turn back, but Lieutenant Ji-hyeok insisted on checking the location. As expected, it was another false report. Suddenly, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok noticed a nearby wildlife surveillance camera. He later requested the footage from the past few days. That evening, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok received the footage. In the video, he saw a young man leading a schoolgirl into the reed field. That girl was the same missing person from the earlier report. Unexpectedly, a young man came to the station to turn himself in. He said that he had killed a schoolgirl and dumped the body in the reed field. That young man was the very same person from the surveillance video. Could all of this really be just a coincidence? The police began interrogating him, asking how he committed the crime and where he had hidden the victim's body. But the young man didn't remember anything and told the police to find it themselves. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok discovered that the young man's house was nearby, which was why he had come to report the case. Through investigation, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok also found out that the person who had called the police station to report the previous false case was this same young man. The next day, the police took the young man to the the scene. They asked him to point out where he had buried the schoolgirl's body, but they searched for a long time, and he couldn't remember the location. Captain Kang became furious and was about to beat the young man, but his colleagues stopped him just in time. When Lieutenant Ji-hyeok spoke to the young man privately and connected the events together, he realized that the young man was posing a riddle for the police. Ji-hyeok wondered what exactly the man was trying to do. That night, Captain Kang received a report that a schoolgirl's body had been found by the seaside. He suspected that it might be the missing girl they were looking for. Only then did Lieutenant Ji-hyeok understand the young man's intention. He had been deliberately misleading the police to create an alibi for himself. Captain Kang and Lieutenant Ji-hyeok rushed to the scene. Upon arrival, Captain Kang asked to see the victim's face. The face was so disfigured it was unrecognizable, but Captain Kang confirmed that it was not the missing schoolgirl they were searching for. The next day, the police regrouped at the reed field to search for the missing schoolgirl once more. Suddenly, the officer in charge received a call from his superior, ordering him to stop the search. It turned out that the superior was the chief. 5 years ago, he was the head of the investigation unit for the murder case in which the body was dumped into the river. Thanks to that case, he was promoted quickly. Now, the police chief didn't want anyone reopening the case, as it would be detrimental to his position. Meanwhile, reporter So-kyung went to the prison to meet with an inmate. This man was the chief prosecutor, the one who had signed the death sentence for the suspect in the case from 5 years ago. He had read an article written by So-kyung about the victims' families. It turned out that the chief prosecutor wanted So-kyung to write another explosive piece that the perpetrator in the river dumping case 5 years ago had been wrongly convicted. He said that So-kyung usually wrote articles about victims' families, so this time she should try writing about the family of someone falsely accused. At that moment, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok went to find the schoolgirl who was enjoying her stay at the hotel. He wanted to ask if she had found any clues about the missing schoolgirl. The girl wanted to take Ji-hyeok to meet a thug, the man who had rented a room to the missing schoolgirl. Then she arranged for the thug to come pick her up at the hotel. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok got into the car with her, but as soon as the thug saw Ji-hyeok, he immediately tried to flee. Ji-hyeok quickly gave chase. When the thug accidentally crashed into a delivery man's vehicle, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok finally caught up with him. Suddenly, the thug pulled out a knife and threatened Ji-hyeok, but he wasn't the least bit worried. He even took out his phone and snapped a photo. He said that now he had evidence, so even if he beat the thug to the point of being hospitalized, it would be fine because the thug had threatened a police officer with a weapon. After that, the thug was subdued by Lieutenant Ji-hyeok and taken back to the station. At the police station, the thug confessed that 3 days ago, he had been in contact with the missing schoolgirl. In their messages, the girl had said that she was going to leave the lodging house. That clearly indicated she had run away of her own accord. Suddenly, Captain Kang received a phone call. The police had found a suicide note belonging to the girl who died by the seaside, but she was definitely not the missing schoolgirl they were searching for. After that, Captain Kang and Ji-hyeok decided to stage a play in front of the young man, because they had figured out that he and the missing girl were working together to create a fake case. The missing girl hadn't really disappeared. She was hiding somewhere. In the interrogation room, Captain Kang pretended to be furious, accusing the young man of causing the death of the other schoolgirl. He claimed that the young man had deliberately led the girl past a surveillance camera to create an alibi, using that to mislead the police, and in the end, he had killed her and dumped the body by the sea. At that moment, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok rushed in and said that they had found the suicide note from the victim. Even though the victim wasn't killed by the young man, Captain Khan continued to act as if it were true. He lunged forward, grabbed the young man by the collar, and demanded answers. Captain Kang insisted that the young man had killed the missing schoolgirl. Otherwise, why would he turn himself in? Ji-hyeok then pretended to push Captain Kang out of the room. He sat down to talk privately with the young man. He said that he knew the young man and the missing schoolgirl were working together, and that the young man had staged a fake murder and turned himself in, while the girl had faked her death and escaped to somewhere else. But the young man hadn't expected the fake play to become real, that the girl had actually left behind a suicide note and truly ended her life. After that, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok went outside. He observed the young man with Captain Kang. The young man seemed to start getting confused, but he was too calm. He immediately realized this was a trap, so he even demanded a defense lawyer for himself. Ji-hyeok offered to call a public defender, but the young man wanted to use a phone to call a lawyer he knew. Ji-hyeok immediately realized that what the young man wanted wasn't a lawyer, it was his phone. Inside, there must have been a way to contact the girl. It seemed he wanted to confirm whether she had really taken her own life, as the letter claimed. However, when he got his phone back, the young man hesitated and didn't make the call. Captain Kang urged him to call the lawyer, but the young man began to lose control. He shouted that he was the murderer to convict him. Wasn't that what the police were so good at? Ji-hyeok and Captain Kang didn't understand what was happening with the young man. Meanwhile, reporter So-kyung had written an article about the family of a death row inmate from the murder case 5 years ago. Unexpectedly, she received a call from a man who scolded her. He was Yoo Jung-so, So-kyung's superior. He forced her to stop writing those kinds of articles because if she continued, the prosecution would start giving them warnings. They didn't want any case to be dug up again. Prosecutor who made a wrongful conviction would lose all honor. She remembered the words of the former chief prosecutor in prison the other day. He had said that it was the police, prosecutors, judges, and the press. They had all colluded to wrongfully convict the defendant in the case from 5 years ago. After that, So-kyung called Captain Kang to arrange a meeting because she knew he had been the police officer in charge of that case. Then she told Captain Kang what she had heard from the man in prison, that the death row inmate in the case 5 years ago had been wrongfully convicted. So-kyung wanted to know the details of that case, but Captain Kang couldn't reveal anything because the situation was very complicated now. The daughter of that death row inmate was missing, and it seemed she was planning something to make police reopen the old case. If So-kyung were to go public now in the media about the case and let those trying to cover it up find out about the daughter, she would definitely be in danger. But what Captain Kang feared most ended up coming true. A journalist came to the police station, snooping around. He accidentally ran into the young man who was being held in the cell. The young man started yelling that he was the killer. The journalist asked him who he had killed, and he confessed that it was the daughter of the death row inmate from 5 years ago. The journalist tried to ask more, but the police discovered him. However, that amount of information was already enough to write an article, and so the news quickly spread. Seeing that the matter could no longer be hidden, the police chief sent people to search for the missing schoolgirl's body. But even though the police dug everywhere, they still couldn't find it because the girl wasn't dead. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok had discovered this long ago. On the phone of the young man being held, he had seen a history of bank card transactions, but the young man had been in jail the past few days, so it definitely wasn't him spending the money. It was likely that he had given his card to the schoolgirl to use. Ji-hyeok and Captain Kang went to the nearby transaction locations to ask about the girl's whereabouts, but no one recognized her. By chance, while the two of them were taking a break and eating at a convenience store, the bank account linked to the young man's phone sent a notification of a new transaction. Coincidentally, the place of transaction was that very convenience store. However, the person who made the purchase wasn't the schoolgirl they were looking for. It was a strange man. The two of them quietly followed the man to a boarding house. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok subdued him and questioned him. It turned out he had used the card to buy things on her behalf. Following the man's directions, they quickly found the missing schoolgirl and brought her back to the police station. Meanwhile, the article written by the journalist had drawn the attention of the prosecution. They came to take the young man away. Taking advantage of the crowd of reporters gathered there, the young man shouted loudly that the defendant in the murder case from 5 years ago had been wrongfully convicted. He called on everyone to help reinvestigate case. It turned out that this had been the plan of the young man and the schoolgirl. They intended to use the power of the media to demand a reinvestigation of the old case. And right at that moment, the missing schoolgirl appeared. Captain Kang brought her back, but suddenly the schoolgirl ran into the crowd. She told the young man that their plan had failed. Then the reporters surrounded them, asking if Eun-hye was the daughter of the death row inmate in the case from 5 years ago. Eun-hye was filled with resentment. She said her father was not a murderer. Pressure from the crowd of journalists caused Eun-hye to bite her tongue until it bled. She cried out in anguish, asking if she had to die for them to be satisfied, and whether the daughter of a criminal didn't have the right to live like a human being. After speaking, the girl turned around and walked away. The young man tried to encourage her, but he was forcibly taken away by the prosecutors. At that moment, the person with the most unstable emotions was Captain Kang, because he had been the officer in charge of the case 5 years ago. That evening, Eun-hye returned to the boarding house. The thug came back and kicked her out. He believed that because of her, he had been arrested by the police. He said he couldn't let the daughter of a murderer stay in his house anymore. Then he dragged Eun-hye outside. She knelt down and begged him for mercy, saying she had nowhere else to go. But the thug cruelly told her to find a place to cut her own wrists so that all the blood of a murderer could flow out of her body. Then he would consider letting her stay. Unexpectedly, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok was standing nearby and witnessed everything. He decided to follow Eun-hye, afraid that she might might do something foolish. Later, Eun-hye threw away the bank card that the young man had given her. She decided not to rely on anyone anymore, but then she began stealing to survive. Since it was her first time and she was still clumsy, she was caught by a store employee. A chase began, and Ji-hyeok also hurriedly ran after them. When they reached a narrow alley, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok could no longer see Eun-hye. Suddenly, someone shouted loudly. Ji-hyeok immediately ran to the spot. He saw Eun-hye lying on the ground, convulsing. Ji-hyeok quickly carried her to the car and rushed her to the hospital. Meanwhile, Captain Kang received an anonymous email. In the email, it stated that the defendant in the case from 5 years ago was innocent. The email even included alibi evidence for the defendant. It was a video recording showing the defendant working at the factory at 3:10 a.m. Captain Kang reviewed the case file from 5 years ago. The time of the victim's death was around 3 a.m. So at that time, the defendant clearly had an alibi. The case from back then had completely gone in the wrong direction. What's more, who was the one who sent this video to Captain Kang? He was truly very suspicious, so he decided that he had to reinvestigate everything clearly. The next day, the young man was released by the prosecution because he was completely innocent. As soon as the young man stepped out of the prosecutor's office, he immediately called a mysterious person. It turned out that the young man used to be a prison guard. The prison where he had worked had held the wrongfully convicted inmate from the case 5 years ago. At that time, the mysterious person had been the one who ordered him, the prison guard, to assault the wrongfully convicted inmate. Fortunately, other prison guards had intervened, otherwise, that inmate might have lost his life. However, afterward, the wrongfully convicted inmate didn't report the prison guard. He even said that he had asked the guard to end his painful life in prison. Back to the present at that moment, reporter So-kyung went to the prosecutor's office and accidentally ran into the prison guard. She arranged to meet him at a cafe to clearly ask about what had happened in prison. After So-kyung listened to everything he said, she couldn't believe that someone with such a kind heart like that prisoner could be a murderer. The prison guard's plea of innocence for the prisoner was probably because of this reason. Reporter So-kyung decided to investigate case herself. She intended to use the power of journalism to save the wrongfully convicted prisoner. In fact, So-kyung had also previously received an anonymous email with content similar to the one sent to Captain Kang, which was why she decided to get involved in this case. Meanwhile, Captain Kang received a notification about the list of executions. In the upcoming round of executions, the wrongfully convicted prisoner was among them. Captain Kang felt extremely guilty because now he knew for certain that the prisoner was innocent. But 5 years ago, it was Captain Kang who had sent that prisoner to jail. Now he had to be the one to clear the prisoner's name. Captain Kang decided to leave the police unit to begin his investigation. However, earlier, the police chief had forbidden anyone in the unit from reopening the case, so Captain Kang said he was taking a leave of absence in order to secretly investigate. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok found this very puzzling, so he requested the case files that Captain Kang had been investigating. Through that, Ji-hyeok learned about the email with the video proving the prisoner in the case from 5 years ago had been wrongfully convicted. He decided to join the case. After all, Ji-hyeok only did the job for fun, so he wasn't afraid of the police chief. He wasn't timid or afraid of superiors like the other officers. After that, Ji-hyeok went to the factory that appeared in the video to investigate. He intended to ask about the wrongfully convicted prisoner, but the worker there told Ji-hyeok that a police officer had already come by earlier to ask about the same thing. That person was none other than Captain Kang. Ji-hyeok approached Captain Kang and begged him to let him join the investigation. Captain Kang had no reason to refuse. By chance, they also ran into reporter Jin, who had come to the same place. They guessed that So-kyung had also received an email similar to theirs. In the end, they went somewhere else to talk. Based on all the evidence, it was clear that the prisoner from the case 5 years ago had been wrongfully convicted. But those who tried to plead for his innocence had not met good ends. One prison guard lost his job and said no one believed him. A high-ranking official from the prosecutor's office ended up in prison. The prisoner's daughter wandered the streets. Those trying to cover up the case were afraid of losing their positions. So-kyung also said that surely the two of them already knew the wrongfully convicted prisoner was about to be executed. With the conscience of a police officer, they clearly knew the truth, yet still allowed someone to be executed unjustly. How could they continue living in peace? But Ji-hyeok still acted indifferent. At that moment, the prison guard went to an abandoned building to meet the mysterious person. He also brought a knife wrapped carefully, but when he arrived, he found only the subordinate of the mysterious person there. The prison guard expressed that he no longer wanted to accept their money. Instead, he asked the subordinate to tell the mysterious person to clear the name of the wrongfully convicted prisoner from 5 years ago. But unexpectedly, the mysterious person turned out to be the real culprit of that case. That was no different from him telling the killer to turn himself in. The subordinate pretended to tell the warden that he would negotiate further with the mysterious person, then left. Suddenly, someone attacked the warden. He pulled out his own knife and slashed the attacker's leg, forcing him to let go in pain. The attacker kicked, making the warden drop his knife. The assailant picked it up and stabbed the warden's leg. Luckily, the warden reacted quickly and kicked the attacker before running away. However, the attacker refused to let him go and chased after him, unaware that the warden had already taken his photo. The warden hurriedly called reporter So-kyung, saying he now knew the real culprit behind the case from 5 years ago and would send her the photo. But in his panic, he accidentally dropped his phone. Hearing the noise, the mysterious person slowly approached. The prison guard quickly hid his phone. In case he was discovered, the evidence would still be protected. On the other side, reporter So-kyung waited for a long time but didn't receive the photo. She began to feel extremely worried. Fortunately, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok found the location of the phone, so the three of them went to that place together, guessing that the prison guard might be in danger. However, they didn't arrive in time. They saw the body of the prison guard on the ground. It looked like he had fallen from a high floor. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok contacted his team and told them to quickly come to the scene. The group of police officers who were drinking had to get up and run over. Unexpectedly, someone had leaked news about the case, and another police unit also arrived at the scene. Their captain was named Kang. He almost got into a fight just to compete over handling the case, but because Captain Kang's team reeked of alcohol, they had to give up the case. So Captain Kang and Lieutenant Ji-hyeok secretly entered the scene. They went to look for the prison guard's phone. Ji-hyeok, using the tracker, discovered that it had not yet been taken away from the scene. Since it was too dark to continue, they decided to sit and rest until morning. Now Captain Kang asked Ji-hyeok why he had become a police officer. Ji-hyeok honestly replied that it was because he had gotten bored spending money at home, so he got a job to make friends. He had no family or relatives left. Captain Kang, hearing that, felt bitter because he had to work hard every day to support a bunch of useless people at home. He didn't know who had it worse. The next morning, the two of them began searching for the prison guard's phone. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok found a trail of blood on the ground. They followed the blood stains and found the spot where the prison guard had been hiding. After that, they called reporter So-kyung to ask for the prison guard's phone number, since before being killed, he had called her. Once they had the number, Ji-hyeok tried calling it, and he easily found the phone hidden nearby. He and Captain Kang brought it to another place before checking it. The two of them found the photo of the real culprit who had murdered the prison guard. After that, the two of them brought it to the technical department for identification. The portrait of the culprit was quickly enhanced clearly, and his identity was also confirmed. He was a gangster who had been imprisoned many times for kidnapping and murder. His name was Jo Sung-dae. They wanted to determine whether he was the real culprit in the murder case, where the body was dumped into the river 5 years ago. So the two of them went to the hospital to ask Eun-hye if Eun-hye and the prison guard had cooperated to clear her father's name, then she would definitely know who the real culprit of that case was. And that was also the reason why the prison guard had been killed. When the two of them came to the hospital room to ask her, Eun-hye refused to speak. But when she found out that the prison guard had died, she began to go crazy. The two of them had no choice but to step outside and wait for her to calm down. Later, Captain Kang returned to comfort her. He admitted that he had been the one who arrested her father that year. But in a moment when Captain Kang looked into her father's eyes, he thought, how could someone with such kind eyes be a murderer? Her father was also about to be executed, so Captain Kang wanted to help clear his name so that he could correct the mistake he had made in the past. Captain Kang sincerely begged Eun-hye to please cooperate and help him. Eun-hye, comforted, felt more at ease. She sat up and told Captain Kang everything she knew. After that, Captain Kang told Ji-hyeok what the girl had said. It turned out that it was her father who had asked prison guard to tell his daughter that he was innocent. Her father knew he would die sooner or break later anyway, because the person behind the case who wanted to cover it up could not let the truth come to light. But the father wanted his daughter to know one thing. No matter what the world out there said, she had to be the only one who believed he was innocent. From that very moment, Captain Kang felt deeply tormented. If he let this case be buried, he would no longer have the face to call himself a police officer. Captain Kang wanted Lieutenant Ji-hyeok to investigate the truth of the case from 5 years ago with him. At the same time, they had to catch the one who killed the prison guard. At this point, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok went to a legal brokerage center. Through investigation, he discovered that this was the company of Jo Sung-dae, the one who had killed the prison guard. Ji-hyeok wanted to meet Jo Sung-dae. The staff said he wasn't there, but Ji-hyeok didn't believe them and went straight into his office to check. The bodyguard tried to stop Ji-hyeok, but he was swiftly taken down with one hand. Ji-hyeok then entered Jo Sung Sung-dae's office and searched the place. There, he found a postcard from the former chief prosecutor who was currently in prison. Unexpectedly, Jo Sung-dae and the former chief prosecutor had been in contact. Suddenly, the bodyguard brought in 2 more thugs. Ji-hyeok once again had to use his fists. With just a few basic moves, he took down all of them. Not one of them could stand up. Ji-hyeok politely greeted the staff outside and left. Then, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok contacted reporter So-kyung, saying that he wanted to meet the former chief prosecutor because he was connected to the killer who murdered the prison guard. Ji-hyeok said he would send a photo of the killer to So-kyung. She replied that she was also on her way to the prison to meet the former chief prosecutor and told Ji-hyeok to wait for her there. After receiving the photo Ji-hyeok sent, So-kyung was shocked. The killer turned out to be the very driver in front of her. So-kyung's anxiety was noticed by him. Jo Sung-dae turned the car onto a different road. The two of them no longer headed toward the prison. On the way, reporter So-kyung pretended to have a stomachache. She told Jo Sung-dae to stop at a roadside gas station so she could use the restroom. After getting out of the car, So-kyung immediately ran into the restroom. She turned on her phone and called Lieutenant Ji-hyeok, saying that she was with Jo Sung-dae. She urgently begged him to come and rescue her. Ji-hyeok told her to send her location, and reporter So-kyung immediately did so. However, Jo Sung-dae noticed that So-kyung was taking too long, so he went into the restroom to check. He told her to open the door, but she didn't. Jo Sung-dae slid a knife through the door gap and unlatched the lock. He snatched her phone to see who she had just contacted. He saw his photo on the phone and realized he had been exposed. He then used the knife to threaten reporter So-kyung, so she fearfully followed him back to the car. Just at that moment, the police arrived at the gas station. Jo Sung-dae quickly drove off to escape, and the police car chased right behind. However, they couldn't catch up and get ahead of his car. Jo Sung-dae was extremely confident in his driving skills, but he didn't expect that Lieutenant Ji-hyeok was waiting for him up ahead. Ji-hyeok pulled out his gun and aimed it straight at Jo Sung-dae's head. Jo Sung-dae had no choice but to stop the car, and reporter So-kyung took the opportunity to escape from the vehicle. She ran behind Ji-hyeok for safety. Jo Sung-dae also got out of the car and raised both hands to surrender. After that, he was taken back to the police station by Lieutenant Ji-hyeok. In the interrogation room, Ji-hyeok took out the knife that Jo Sung-dae had used to threaten So-kyung. He asked whether it was also the knife used to kill the prison guard. Jo Sung-dae denied it, saying it was just a toy he always carried with him. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok wanted to send the knife for examination. Jo Sung-dae joked that it was his precious belonging and told them to take good care of it. Later, Ji-hyeok met reporter So-kyung again. She thanked him for saving her and said that at that moment she thought she was going to die. Unexpectedly, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok coldly replied that it was just the duty of a police officer. Meanwhile, the captain of the investigation team for the prison guard's case held a press conference. The case was concluded as a voluntary departure from life. Someone questioned the wounds on the victim's body, asking whether someone had said the victim was slashed. Captain Gu-kung denied that information, saying the wounds might have been caused by hitting a sharp object while falling. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok and reporter So-kyung were also present at the press conference. Ji-hyeok believed that someone had intervened to stop the investigation of the case. So-kyung was extremely upset. She couldn't accept that police could conclude the case so carelessly, especially since she had almost lost her life. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok said that both being a reporter and a police officer involved similar dangers. If she didn't want to continue, she could quit. Reporter So-kyung could no longer hold back. She said that the police had guns, but reporters like her did not. Reporters fought with their pens. When facing dangerous criminals, the risk of death was even higher for reporters than for the police. But even so, So-kyung would not give up on the wrongful case from 5 years ago. She decided that she had to follow Ji-hyeok to the end in this case. On the other side, Captain Kang received a call from Lieutenant Ji-hyeok. He informed Captain Kang that he had found the killer of the prison guard. However, because the press conference held by the captain had stated that the prison guard died by voluntary departure from life, Jo Sung-dae was released. It was certain that Captain Gu-kyung and Jo Sung-dae were connected. The key was the case from 5 years ago, because Captain Gu-kyung was also one of the people in charge of that case. At night, Captain Kang gathered Ji-hyeok and So-kyung. They started following Captain Gu-kyung and discovered that he was having an affair with the wife of a deceased colleague. Suddenly, Captain Kang received a call from a colleague. His office was being searched by the prosecution. Unexpectedly, Captain Kang was involved in a bribery case. He cursed angrily and swore to get to the bottom of this this case. Captain Kang knew that he was being framed because he had reopened the case from 5 years ago. His teammates also knew the reason, but couldn't do anything about it. The whole team went out drinking together again. At that moment, the youngest officer in the team was a little drunk. He expressed his frustration, saying that didn't the police supposed to be heroes of the people? Why did they stay silent when they know someone was innocent? Another teammate jokingly said that it wasn't his business and told him to look at pretty girls at the next table. Hearing that, the young officer got upset and walked out. The senior officer quickly ran after him. The two of them sat down and talked. At that moment, the senior officer explained that, in reality, there were all kinds of people everywhere. Some were evil and falsely accused others. Some tried hard to uncover the truth like Captain Kang, and some, like them, were powerless and could only sit and watch. He said it was best to just live a normal life day by day. After hearing that, the young officer let go of the frustration in his heart. The next morning, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok and Captain Kang went to the bridge where the case from 5 years ago had taken place. Following the hint from the deceased prison guard, they needed to start re-investigating the case from there. The person whose body was thrown from the bridge was a female student. The two of them went to the home of that female student. Her mother gave them some basic information. At that point, Ji-hyeok became curious, and Captain Kang confessed that he had been the one investigating the victim's background at the time, but was stopped by the current chief. That was why he hadn't looked into it further. In the end, Captain Kang hastily concluded the case according to the chief's wishes. Thinking back now, he still felt regretful. After that, the two of them went to meet a friend of the murdered student. The friend said that the girl used to draw portraits for money, so perhaps the suspect might be found in one of her drawings. But by the time she finished the portrait, the girl had already delivered it and didn't leave behind any of the drawings. However, fortunately, the sketch she made before finishing the portrait still remained. The friend took it out and gave it to the two of them. Among the sketches, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok recognized a familiar face. It was his cousin. He took Captain Kang to his cousin's house. There, they saw the portrait the deceased student had drawn hanging in his house. Just then, the cousin also returned home. He loudly greeted Ji-hyeok and then sat down to talk. It seemed that Ji-hyeok didn't have a very good relationship with his cousin. At the beginning of the conversation, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok asked his cousin if he was the one who killed the female student 5 years ago. This surprised the cousin. He asked Ji-hyeok if he really wanted to ask so directly. Ji-hyeok didn't deny it and told him to answer. The cousin became angry and kicked the two of them out. At that point, Captain Kang wondered whether Ji-hyeok truly suspected his cousin of killing the female student. Ji-hyeok said he was just testing him. If the cousin really did it, then he would definitely try to speed up the process of killing the wrongly convicted prisoner in jail. That way, no one could reopen the case from 5 years ago, a perfectly executed cover-up. Only then did Captain Kang marvel at Ji-hyeok's sharp thinking. In the afternoon, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok met a delivery man who used to work for his cousin. The delivery man told Ji-hyeok everything he knew. After that, Ji-hyeok reported it back to Captain Kang. Unexpectedly, Ji-hyeok's cousin used to date the female student who was killed 5 years ago. At that moment, Captain Kang voiced his suspicion. Perhaps the cousin killed her out of revenge after being betrayed. Ji-hyeok didn't deny it, because in fact, he had witnessed his cousin's cruelty since they were children. So it was true this guy was a pervert. They had to thoroughly investigate him, because he could very well be the culprit behind the case from 5 years ago. However, Captain Kang still had a concern. Since Ji-hyeok was a relative of the suspect, he could be removed from the case. But Lieutenant Ji-hyeok still held a deep resentment toward his cousin. He said that even if his cousin really was the killer, he would still make sure to catch him, no matter what. That night, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok returned to the police station. His colleague brought him Jo-sung-dae's knife along with the forensic results. They couldn't find the DNA of the deceased prison guard on it, so Lieutenant Ji-hyeok had no choice but to release Jo-sung-dae. Suddenly, he received a call from Captain Kang. Someone wanted to meet him to talk. After that, Ji-hyeok headed to a bar. When he arrived, he saw Captain Kang enthusiastically recounting the things they had recently investigated. While reporter So-kyung kept pouring him drinks, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok sat down and sarcastically said to So-kyung that he didn't expect a reporter to use alcohol to extract information from the police. So-kyung didn't expect Ji-hyeok to see her as that kind of person, so she immediately got angry, stood up, and left. At that point, Captain Kang said that they were all on the same side, and she was the only one who truly trusted them. She was also doing her best to help investigate the case and clear the name of the person who was about to be wrongly executed. He scolded Ji-hyeok for doubting reporter So-kyung like that. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok then realized that he had misspoken. He quickly drove after her and caught up with So-kyung's car. He got out and bowed to apologize to her. After that, the two of them went somewhere else to talk. At that moment, Ji-hyeok shared his thoughts. He advised So-kyung that if she had family and a boyfriend, she shouldn't get involved in this case. Otherwise, they would be in danger, and so would she. But reporter So-kyung didn't seem worried at all. She said she only had her mother left, and in fact, her mother was in a nursing home and was about to die, so she needed to do good for the world. For example, if she knew someone was about to die unjustly, she would save them no matter what. So-kyung then asked Ji-hyeok, what about him? Wasn't he afraid that his loved ones might be in danger too? Lieutenant Ji-hyeok smiled faintly and said that he no longer had anyone by his side, so what was there for him to be afraid of? The two people, whose souls were in sync, looked at each other in silence. After talking, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok took So-kyung home. He gave her a whistle, telling her that if she was ever in danger, she should blow it, and he promised he would appear by her side. So-kyung happily accepted the gift. Then Ji-hyeok returned to Captain Kang. They identified 3 people who needed to be monitored. Captain Do-chang, who was in charge of the prison guard's case, the person who attacked the prison guard, and Tae-jang, Ji-hyuk's cousin. But there were only 2 of them, so they couldn't follow all of them, and if they let reporter So-kyung follow someone alone, they were afraid she might face danger like last time. Captain Kang suggested discussing the matter with members of the team to ask for their help, but Lieutenant Ji-hyeok disagreed because there was no one among them he could trust. Captain Kang joked that it seemed like Ji-hyeok was worried after all. Ji-hyeok replied that he actually only had one concern, not being able to catch the murderer. Unexpectedly, Ji-hyeok also carried trauma from his father's death in the past. At that time, the police couldn't catch the killer, so as he grew up, he wanted to become a police officer to make sure that no criminal could escape the punishment for their crimes. That night, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok had a nightmare. The killer stabbed his father brutally, but when the police asked him, Ji-hyeok couldn't remember the killer's face. In the end, he had let the murderer escape justice. After that incident, Ji-hyuk's mother also became depressed. He was deeply heartbroken when he discovered that his mother had taken sleeping pills and left the world. He woke up startled from the nightmare. It was a wound in his heart that could never be erased. The next day, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok and Captain Kang continued their investigation and went to meet an ex-boyfriend of the female student who had been killed in the case 5 years ago. He was a student in the same art department as the girl. The reason they broke up was because he discovered she had cheated on him. After hearing him explain the situation in detail, Ji-hyuk took out a watch. He asked whether the watch the ex-boyfriend had seen was this one. He immediately recognized it and confirmed that it was. Lieutenant Ji-hyuk then took out a photo of Tae-jang. He asked whether the man who had been with the girl at the airport was this person. The ex-boyfriend confirmed it was him. Upon hearing that, Captain Kang became angry and questioned why he had only now come forward. Didn't he realize that case from 5 years ago involving his ex-girlfriend had gone way too far? The ex-boyfriend gave an answer that left Captain Kang speechless. No one had asked him back then, so what was he supposed to say? The police had come to a conclusion very quickly in that case, and even if he had spoken up, there was no guarantee that he would be living peacefully now. At that moment, Lieutenant Ji-hyuk went to meet reporter So-kyung. She had obtained an additional video from a confidential source inside the police department. This was the video that recorded Tae-jang's alibi on the night the murder happened. He entered a hotel with another woman. When the woman came out, it was 1 a.m., and he stayed there until 9 a.m. The two of them brought the video for analysis. However, the video had no cuts or edits. Suddenly, Lieutenant Ji-hyuk noticed something strange in the video. He found it odd that a fly stayed in the same spot too long. Ji-hyuk immediately realized the issue. The video hadn't been edited, but had been recorded twice. Now there were 2 overlapping camera feeds. The first was the original camera recording the hallway in front of Tae-jang's room. The second camera was used to record the footage displayed from the first one. Then, someone paused the first camera for a moment. The time on the second camera kept running normally, but what it recorded was just a still frame from the paused first camera. This method was very sophisticated. Right after that, Ji-hyuk reported the matter to Captain Kang. He asked Captain Kang to assign someone to monitor Tae-jang, but nothing could get past Tae-jang. Hearing the news over the phone, he became furious. On another side, Captain Kang went to the hospital to pick up Yoon-hye and bring her to his house because she had nowhere else to go, but she had only been there for a short time before she disappeared. The girl took a bus to the prison to visit her father. She was extremely upset and told her father not to pretend to be pitiful. He wasn't pitiful at all. Because of him, the prison guard had to die. That man was the one who deserved sympathy. When he heard that the prison guard had been murdered, the father was deeply heartbroken. The guilt made the wrongfully convicted prisoner take all the blame onto himself. He told his daughter to leave and never come looking for him again. He said he was truly a murderer, and she should consider that this father never existed. She was also not the daughter of a killer. After saying that, the father asked the prison guard to lead him away, leaving the girl sitting there crying her heart out. But the father was no better off. As soon soon as he left the room, he painfully collapsed to the ground. That evening, Eun-hye returned to Captain Kang's house. He had been anxiously waiting for her. Eun-hye said to Captain Kang that please save her father. Captain Kang promised that he would definitely do so to correct his past mistake. The next day, Captain Kang and Ji-hyeok went to find a lawyer to request a retrial for the case from 5 years ago. He wanted to prove that the defendant in that case was innocent. The lawyer didn't understand why. With the execution approaching, they would go through the trouble of asking for a retrial. At that moment, Captain Kang decided to admit his mistake. Back then, due to negligence in his duties, he overlooked his responsibilities as a police officer, allowing an innocent person to be wrongfully convicted. Now that person was about to be executed. If he stayed silent, he would regret it for the rest of his life. The lawyer questioned, but by doing this, Captain Kang's police honor would be completely destroyed. Captain Kang replied that he would rather lose his honor than live with that guilt for the rest of his life. The lawyer finally agreed to help. Afterward, the three of them gathered all the evidence they had obtained: the alibi video, the video showing the suspect, and the testimony from the ex-boyfriend of the murdered girl from 5 years ago. The second witness was Captain Kang, the police officer who had investigated the case. After a long day of work, everyone was tired, but the lawyer had finished compiling the report and was preparing to request a retrial. Now, they just needed the defendant from the case 5 years ago to sign the petition for a retrial. After that, they could submit it to the court for a decision, and everything would proceed smoothly. The next day, the lawyer brought the retrial petition to the wrongfully convicted prisoner from the case 5 years ago. The prisoner asked why anyone would go through such trouble. The lawyer explained that it was the police officer who was in charge of the case 5 years ago. Upon hearing the name, the prisoner was filled with hatred. He asked why, when he had protested his innocence 5 years ago, nothing had been done. Now, with his execution approaching, the police officer was requesting a retrial. The prisoner told the lawyer that many people in prison who had submitted retrial petitions had been rejected, and he believed the police would never admit to their mistakes. The lawyer told him that this time, Captain Kang would personally testify for the retrial. He would admit that he had made an error in his judgment regarding the case 5 years ago. Even though he knew he would lose everything, he was still willing to do it, and he would definitely help the prisoner get his name cleared. After hearing these words, the prisoner decided to sign the petition for a retrial. At that moment, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok and Captain Kang went to meet the lawyer. The lawyer informed them that the prisoner had signed the retrial petition, but the problem now was that the judges were unwilling to reconsider the case from 5 years ago. The three of them had to come up with another plan. As they left the lawyer's office, Ji-hyeok suggested a method to Captain Kang to use public opinion to pressure the judges into reopening the case. Captain Kang said that this matter would have to be handled by reporter So-kyung. Then, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok told Captain Kang to let him take care of it, and Captain Kang should focus on his own tasks, not letting what they were doing be exposed, as someone might cause trouble. After Captain Kang left, Ji-hyeok returned to the lawyer's office. It turned out the reason he hadn't revealed his plan was because he still had doubts that the lawyer might betray them. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok told the lawyer to help him with this matter, and that he would pay whatever amount of money was needed. But the lawyer was a good person. He assured Ji-hyeok that he would stand by their side in this case. Some lawyers know their client is guilty, but still choose to defend them to the end, while others don't sacrifice their conscience for money, so everyone could trust him. After hearing this, Ji-hyeok felt reassured. Afterward, he went to meet reporter So-kyung. He wanted to ask her to make a big deal about something in the media, namely that the wrongfully convicted prisoner from the case 5 years ago was requesting a retrial. The goal was to pressure the judges to accept case. However, reporter So-kyung advised against doing it directly, as that could expose their plan. Instead, So-kyung went to ask a colleague to post this news on the hot news section of the channel. In the live broadcast, the station announced that the prisoner from the case 5 years ago was requesting a retrial, accompanied by a video interview with police officer responsible for the case. Though his face was obscured, everyone knew it was Captain Kang. In fact, this was just an act on his part. During the interview, Captain Kang displayed an agitated response when asked about the reasons. Why did the prisoner he arrested in the case 5 years ago request a retrial? This would make people suspicious. He must be worried that something will be exposed, which is why he became so agitated. The station continued to air another video interview with the victim's ex-boyfriend from the case. When he was asked why he hadn't come forward as a witness, he answered that the police didn't ask him. This confirmed that the police were negligent in the case. After the broadcast, a group of citizens staged a protest, demanding that the judge approve the retrial of the case from 5 years ago. Eun-hye watched this news and became very excited, while those who were plotting harm began to worry. The commissioner watched the broadcast and immediately called the head of the police department. They conspired together to come up with a plan. The commissioner then sent his younger brother, Yoo Jung-seok, to meet Oh Tae-yang. Since they knew that Oh Tae-yang would eventually have to testify if the retrial took place, Yoo Jung-seok instructed Oh Tae-yang to keep a certain secret. He told him to follow the script that commissioner gave him. The commissioner, who opened the door, would also be the one to close it. Oh Tae-yang was told to just live his life in peace. He didn't understand what was going on, but still agreed to follow along. At that moment, the lawyer came to the prison to meet the wrongly accused inmate. Captain Kang said that all the evidence favorable to the inmate had been gathered, and now they just needed to wait for the retrial so he could be cleared of all charges. But the wrongly accused inmate started behaving strangely. He no longer wanted the retrial. It turned out that a few days earlier, a fellow inmate had shown him a video in which Eun-hye was threatened and had a seizure. Later, Captain Kang and Lieutenant Ji-hyeok came to the prison to persuade the inmate once more. Captain Kang told him not to give up for the sake of his daughter. When he heard his daughter's name, the inmate became extremely agitated. He asked where his daughter was. Captain Kang said she was staying at his own house and that it was his daughter who had asked them to help him, so he couldn't let her down again. The inmate fell silent for a moment, then asked Captain Kang to take care of his daughter. He still held to his decision not to go through with the retrial. Captain Kang and Ji-hyeok were powerless. They knew there had to be a reason. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok went to see Eun-hye. He asked if she had met anyone recently. She told him that a thug had lured her somewhere, but he only threatened her and triggered her seizure. He didn't do anything else to harm her. Ji-hyeok realized that the thug was the one who had recorded the video and sent it to her father in prison. He wanted to threaten the man into stopping the retrial, but he had no personal motive to do it. Someone else had to be behind it. The next day, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok followed the thug. He went into the thug's house and forced him to sit down for a talk, but the thug still tried to resist. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok warned him that if he wanted his house to become a murder scene, he had no problem letting the police find out about it. What Ji-hyeok meant was that he would finish the thug off and stage it as a case he had uncovered himself. The thug had no choice but to sit still and answer Ji-hyeok's questions. At that moment, a woman came to the police station looking for Captain Kang. She was the wife of a police officer who had been killed while investigating the case 5 years ago. Back then, he had just started his career. The woman said that she used to resent her husband for leaving her and their daughter behind, but because he had died in the line of duty, she could proudly talk about him with their daughter. If they now proceeded with the retrial and reinvestigated case, and her daughter found out that her father didn't actually die while on duty, she would be deeply ashamed in front of her child. A police officer only leaves behind the title of upholding justice, but now, even the pride in her daughter's heart would be gone. Her daughter wouldn't know how to live on. This put Captain Kang in a very difficult position. He intended to invite Ji-hyeok and reporter So-kyung out for drinks to ease the sadness, but he had no idea that the woman was actually the lover of Captain Go-chang. The two of them had conspired together, stirring guilt in Captain Kang's heart, causing him to reconsider the retrial for the wrongly accused inmate. At that time, Captain Kang kept drinking to get drunk and forget his sorrow, to the point where Ji-hyeok and So-kyung had to drag him home. Only then did Captain Kang stop drinking. After throwing Captain Kang into the car, Ji-hyeok and So-kyung went out to drink some more. Ji-hyeok didn't used to drink alcohol, but now, it was just him and the beautiful reporter. He couldn't lose face in front of a woman. Ji-hyeok drank a whole glass in one go, but right after finishing it, he collapsed. So-kyung thought something had happened to him and urgently called an ambulance. On the ambulance, the doctor said that Lieutenant Ji-hyeok was just asleep. At that time, Captain Kang still hadn't gone home. He had snuck out to drink alone. He accidentally saw his younger sister with her lover, but her lover turned out to be a gangster. This gangster used to be in the same gang as Captain Kang. Unexpectedly, before becoming a police officer, Captain Kang had been a gangster himself. Captain Kang didn't want his sister to be with someone like that. With alcohol in his system, he suddenly snapped and wanted to get into a fight with his former colleague, but the man in black didn't want to argue, so he quickly ran away. His sister stayed behind to stop Captain Kang, but he still chased after him. Seeing how stubborn her brother was, she knocked him down with a single move, leaving him lying still. She scolded her brother, asking what he was even trying to do. They both came from the same gangster background, but now the man had become a director, while her brother was still just an ordinary cop. She questioned him what was the point of being a police officer. Then, in anger, she walked away. Captain Kang sat dazed on the ground, thinking about the reason he had become a police officer. In the first place, wasn't it to uphold justice? Captain Kang regained his resolve. He had to solve the 5-year-old case no matter what. He was determined to bring justice to the victim. The next day, Captain Kang and Ji-hyeok went to the prison. From the thug's confession, confession, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok learned that he was only following orders to stop the wrongly accused inmate from requesting a retrial. Through the prison's security cameras, Ji-hyeok and Captain Kang also discovered another inmate. He was the one who had brought the video to the wrongly accused inmate. So they dragged him into a private room to talk. Ji-hyeok didn't say much and went straight to the point. He asked who had hired the inmate. He also said that whatever they had paid him, he would pay double. But the inmate didn't know who had hired him either. Then, the two of them made the inmate do one thing for them. He had to bring a phone to the wrongly accused inmate and let him watch another video. In the video, the thug admitted that he was the one who recorded it, but he hadn't done anything to the girl. He also promised that from now on, he wouldn't dare touch her again. After that, the inmate rolled up his sleeve on his arm was a message from the girl. She said she wanted her father to walk her down the aisle. The wrongly accused inmate was moved and motivated. In the end, he agreed to proceed with the retrial. Captain Kang and Ji-hyeok were both very happy. A few days later, the retrial took place. The lawyer called the first witness to the stand. It was the victim's roommate. She had met the defendant before. He had only come to ask about the fine arts program they were studying so he could help guide his daughter's career. Eun-hye also painted beautifully. Then the lawyer brought up the charges against the defendant. The witness noticed that several details didn't match. It turned out the content had been copied from another case. The lawyer submitted both reports to the judge. The person who had copied the report was Captain Do-chang. It was Captain Kang who had stolen the document from his office. Next, the lawyer presented a video as the defendant's alibi evidence. At that time, the defendant was at work, so he couldn't have been at the crime scene. The judge asked why this evidence had only surfaced now. The lawyer replied that this question should be directed to the investigating police. It was either that they had hidden it or conducted the investigation irresponsibly. Finally, the lawyer presented evidence pointing to a suspect. He named Oh Tae-yang, who had once been in a close relationship with the victim. He also showed Oh Tae-yang's alibi video. But after analysis, they discovered that the video had been re-recorded from another video. The reason the suspect had deliberately faked the video was unclear. At that point, all the evidence in favor of the defendant had been submitted. The judge needed time to review the evidence, so the trial was adjourned. Right afterward, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok received a phone call. It was from a patrol officer who had been on duty near the scene of the murder 5 years ago. That night, they had found a suspicious vehicle. Inside the car was Oh Tae-yang. Seeing that the driver was acting strangely, the police tested him for alcohol and found he was driving under the influence. So Oh Tae-yang was taken to the station, and the car was left behind at the scene. Back in the present, Captain Kang asked the officer if they had noticed anything unusual about Oh Tae-yang's car that night. The officer replied that they had stopped Oh Tae-yang because he suddenly made a U-turn in the middle of an intersection. Captain Kang wondered why Oh Tae-yang had fled the scene only to return. He must have dropped something important. Ji-hyeok held up a wristwatch and said that this was exactly what he had come back for. Through the investigation, he discovered that the woman who had brought the watch to be auctioned was the wife of the police officer who had died while investigating the case 5 years ago. The woman realized she could no longer hide the truth from the police, so she was forced to admit everything. It turned out that 5 years ago, while searching for clues at the crime scene, Captain Do-chang had found the wristwatch. He then gave it to her to bring to an auction. Captain Kang wanted the wife to testify in court so they could catch the real murderer who had killed her husband. She had no other choice but to agree. Captain Do-chang had been listening to the conversation from outside. He came in and asked the woman what she had told the police. She said that she had told them everything she knew. At that moment, Captain Do-chang revealed his true face. He stepped outside and made a phone call. He informed someone that the woman had confessed everything to Captain Kang and that she also said she would testify in court. The person on the other end ordered him to get rid of her. Later, a visitor came to the place where the woman worked. He was the same person who had murdered the prison warden. At that moment, the commissioner gathered the police for a meeting, but he didn't allow Captain Kang to attend because the purpose of the meeting was to slander him. The commissioner had learned that Captain Kang had testified in the second retrial with the intention of proving the innocence of the defendant in the case from 5 years ago. The commissioner said that Captain Kang was the greatest disgrace to the police force, but what he didn't know was that it was people like him, those who covered up the truth, who were the ones truly shameful. Because of this matter, Captain Kang was shunned by his colleagues. He was even demoted to working as a security guard. That night, after his shift ended, Captain Kang received a phone call. Unexpectedly, it was his former colleagues who had come to his house. It turned out that they were also people who stood on the side of justice. They had always believed in what their captain was doing. They pretended to go catch robbers, but in fact, it was just a distraction to mislead the commissioner. Their real real goal was to help Captain Kang resolve the wrongful conviction case at hand. The robbers they caught were not immediately taken to the police station. Instead, they were looked after by Captain Kang's younger sister. She had a pile of gold medals in Taekwondo, so the thugs didn't dare act out. At that point, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok assigned tasks to his teammates. That meant he had everything arranged for the retrial the next day. On the other side, reporter So-kyung received an audio recording. If presented in court, it would be beneficial to the defendant. Unfortunately, she was discovered by Yoo Jung-seo, her department chief. The chief asked who had sent the audio recording, but reporter So-kyung refused to say, leaving him helpless. So-kyung wanted to write an article about the discovery of new evidence and also planned to expose the people involved in the case from 5 years ago. The chief allowed her to publish the story, but on one condition: she had to tell him who had provided the recording. Reporter So-kyung had no choice but to reveal that the source was the former chief prosecutor. Upon hearing that, the chief agreed to let her write the article. She worked tirelessly through the night. However, the next day, the article was not published. Reporter Swung, furious, went to confront the chief. He told her that it was a decision made by higher authorities. The case from 5 years ago involved too many people, from prosecutors, judges, to even the press. If they were exposed, none of them would be left unscathed, not even the one who wrote the article. So Chung became even more furious. She said she wasn't afraid of that. Didn't the chief once say that a journalist's pen was meant to protect the vulnerable in society? He bluntly replied, protect whom, when he couldn't even protect himself. Then he advised So Chung to stop meddling in other people's business. After saying that, he walked away, leaving reporter So Kyung standing there in frustration. The second retrial was about to take place, but the witness had still not arrived. 2 police officers went to pick up the witness and discovered that Jo Sung-dae had already taken her away. The 2 officers quickly got into a taxi and followed them to a house. When they saw Jo Sung-dae's car, they immediately went inside to search. Suddenly, Jo Sung-dae stepped out of a room. He brushed past the 2 officers and fled. One officer chased after him, while the other checked the room. The officer who chased him eventually caught up, but was struck hard with a kick. Meanwhile, the other officer entered the room, but the woman inside was not the witness. It turned out Jo Sung-dae had swapped her out. The officer called back to report to Captain Kang. Captain Kang immediately ordered everyone to return, saying he would figure out another plan. Just as he ended the call, Captain Kang received another one. The real witness was at the airport. She apologized for not being able to testify. Captain Kang realized someone must have threatened her, so he didn't blame her. It turned out Captain Go-kung had forced the witness to leave the country temporarily. He didn't want the witness to participate in the retrial. Previously, he had even intended to harm her and her daughter, but because he still had some feelings for his lover, he let her go abroad to keep her alive. At that point, Captain Kang was filled with rage at those bastards who used human lives to threaten others. He decided that he would testify in court himself. Meanwhile, the second retrial was taking place. The lawyer presented the wristwatch that Oh Tae-yang had dropped at the crime scene, along with a traffic violation report issued to him on a road 13 kilometers away. The time he was fined was close to the time the murder occurred 5 years ago. The traffic patrol officers at that time said they saw Oh Tae-yang's car turn around and head back toward the crime scene. According to the lawyer's assumption, he returned to retrieve the watch, but was stopped and taken away by the patrol officers, so the watch remained at the scene. The reason the police didn't find it was because someone had taken it and hidden it. A witness was given the watch by that person, and she later took it to be auctioned. The judge asked who that witness was. The lawyer turned to look at Lieutenant Ji-hyeok, who responded with a shake of his head. The witness couldn't come, so the lawyer said that they had a second witness, the victim's daughter. 5 years ago, 5 days after the incident, while the defendant and his daughter were out delivering goods, the daughter noticed someone secretly placing something into her father's car. It was the victim's hair. This had also been used as evidence to accuse the defendant. At that point, the judge asked the girl if she remembered the person's face. The girl only remembered that the person wore a cap covering the face and jeans. The lawyer argued that although the girl didn't know who it was, if the person's face were shown, she would be able to identify him. The judge agreed. The lawyer played a video. In the video, Captain Go-kung was also wearing a cap and jeans during an interview after the incident. However, children don't know how to lie. The girl was hesitant and didn't dare to confirm whether Captain Go-kung was the one who had placed the victim's hair in in the car. Her father smiled and encouraged her, saying it was okay, she had done well. The second retrial ended. The girl regretfully asked the lawyer if what she had done was wrong. She believed that since the police had wrongly accused her father, maybe she had also wrongly accused someone else. The lawyer reassured her that she had done very well and that they should not lie. Reporter So-kyung was hiding nearby, watching everything. She was deeply conflicted about whether to hand over the evidence she had. That night, So-kyung went to meet Ji-hyeok. She took him out for wine because she felt uneasy. Unexpectedly, So-kyung told Ji-hyeok to thank her. He didn't understand what she meant. She said that one day he would surely have to thank her because she would help him continue being a police officer. Then So-kyung asked if he would help her continue being a reporter too. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok paused and replied that sometimes people shouldn't live only for themselves, but also for others. After hearing that, So-kyung smiled and left happily. That day was the final retrial. Captain Kang prepared thoroughly to testify. Suddenly, he received a call from the commissioner. The commissioner had found out that Captain Kang had left work to attend the trial. The commissioner's words made him furious. He told the commissioner that if he wanted to fire him, then go ahead. He no longer wanted to work under a bastard like him. Before the final retrial, the prosecutor from the case 5 years ago met with the defendant in private. He used manipulative tactics to play mind games with him. The prosecutor told the defendant that perhaps he didn't kill the schoolgirl, but when the police kept pinning the crime on him, did he get angry and strike back at the police? If it was an unintentional killing, the sentence would be lighter. The prosecutor tried to persuade the defendant to admit that he was the one who killed the police officer, saying that this way both sides would win the trial, and afterward, the prosecutor would help him get away with the crime. This made the defendant think very hard. Now, the final retrial officially took place. Captain Kang came forward as a witness. He said that he had pressured the defendant into confessing because the deceased police officer was his best friend, so he had overlooked many important details of the case. Captain Kang also said that he had carelessly lost the murder weapon before sending it to the forensic lab, so it might have been switched. Suddenly, another witness appeared, someone invited by the prosecution. She was also a police officer who had investigated the case 5 years ago. Now she had become an inspector. Although she used to be Captain Kang's subordinate, she had been promoted, even faster than him. The female inspector admitted that she was the one who lost the murder weapon. Captain Kang was too kind-hearted and always took responsibility upon himself. This time was no different. After seeing the defendant's daughter pleading for justice, he had felt compassion and helped initiate the retrial. Captain Kang angrily said that it was the chief of police who lost the weapon. So why was she lying? She retorted that Captain Kang was the one lying. The judge ordered them to remain silent. Suddenly, the defendant stood up and asked to speak. He said that he didn't kill the schoolgirl, but he did admit to attacking the detective investigating the case. The defendant had fallen into the prosecutor's trap. The prosecutor then revealed his true face. He said that this was an agreement made between the two of them 5 years ago. The defendant would plead guilty to killing the police officer, and the prosecutor would help him avoid the murder charge. But the prosecutor also said that even 5 years ago, he had already told the defendant that it couldn't be done because court wasn't a place where lies could be negotiated. That was something he couldn't do. At that moment, the defendant was stunned. He had been brilliantly deceived by the prosecutor. The trial ended. The defendant still received the death sentence. At that time, Captain Kang and Ji-hyeok came to visit the defendant before his execution. Captain Kang took the blame upon himself. The defendant comforted him, saying that they should have won, that it was all his own fault. The defendant also spoke of his final wish, asking them to take care of his daughter. Then he was led away. His whole body trembled with fear. Who wouldn't be afraid of death? He looked out the window and saw Captain Kang standing there with his daughter. The little girl waved goodbye to her father one last time, giving him the strength to take the final steps of his life. A few days later, Captain Kang and Ji-hyeok visited the defendant's grave. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok suddenly noticed that Yoo Jung-suk was also there, visiting someone's grave. Elsewhere, Oh Tae-yang went to meet Captain Gu-kung. He handed him a luxury watch. Now that the retrial was over, he told him to wear it as a challenge to anyone who dared to mess with the powerful and the wealthy like them. At that time, the former chief prosecutor was also released from prison. He arranged to meet with reporter So-kyung. He asked her why she hadn't used the recording he had sent as evidence. It could have proven the defendant's innocence and spared him from the death sentence. But now, everything was too late. So-kyung remained silent and thoughtful. The former chief prosecutor seemed to understand. Perhaps doing so would have ruined So-kyung's career. She couldn't destroy herself just to help someone else. She hadn't done anything wrong. After saying that, the former chief prosecutor walked away, leaving So-kyung standing there, deep in thought for a long time. She too felt a deep regret in her heart over the matter. That night, she once again turned to alcohol for comfort. Later, she invited Lieutenant Lieutenant Ji-hyeok to meet and talk. Only now did she take out the video recording that the former chief prosecutor had sent her before the retrial. Finally, reporter So-kyung asked Ji-hyeok what the people in the video were really talking about. The content was a conversation between the prosecutor from the case 5 years ago and the chief of police. They discussed how, if it hadn't been for the chief's orders, the wrongly accused defendant would have been released at that time. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok was also very surprised upon hearing it. He wondered what kind of relationship those people had in the case from 5 years ago. Now, So-kyung only felt regret for not revealing the video during the retrial. Ji-hyeok comforted her, saying that the defendant had been doomed from the start, but the ones behind the case from 5 years ago would not escape justice either. If you find out anything more about the recording, let me know, Ji-hyeok said before standing up and leaving. So-kyung replied that she agreed to his suggestion. Then she ordered 20 more bottles of premium liquor and asked him to pay for them. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok smiled in response, as if to say yes. Meanwhile, Captain Kang returned home. Although he had been demoted and disciplined after the retrial, his good colleagues did not abandon him. They came to his house to celebrate the 6,428th day of his service as a police officer. Captain Kang was happy that everyone still remembered him. A little later, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok also arrived to join the celebration. Suddenly, Captain Kang received a phone call. Everyone had to rush to the police station again. It turned out that a new recruit had gone out to catch a group of thieves, but he had beaten them so badly that their faces were swollen and bruised. As a result, they sued him for using force without an arrest warrant. Captain Kang had to run around collecting money from his teammates, but everyone was poor and only had small bills. At that moment, Ji-hyeok pulled out his wallet and said they could use his money. His colleagues were stunned, to say the least. Then Captain Kang took out the money to handle the situation, but it seemed the thieves weren't cooperating. He pulled out his police ID and said he knew exactly who they were. Maybe he should go and get an arrest warrant. After resolving the matter, Captain Kang and Ji-hyeok went back home. On the way, they saw Eun-hae wandering alone. Captain Kang knew she had nowhere else to go, so he took her home to care for her. He still felt guilty about her father's death, but Eun-hae no longer blamed him. On the contrary, she had become stronger. Eun-hae said she wanted Captain Kang to help her catch the person who plotted to harm her father. Captain Kang had the same intention. He told her to behave and study hard while staying at his house. That way, she could fulfill her father's final wish. The two of them linked pinkies and made a promise. Two people hooked pinkies to establish an agreement. The next day, Captain Kang began probing the chief. Noticing that Captain Kang had strange words and actions, the chief promptly summoned a meeting. With his teammates, he asked them if Captain Kang had shown any unusual behavior lately. The teammates pretended not to know anything. Suddenly, Ji-hyeok received a call. It was from Captain Kang. The two of them acted out a scene. After hanging up, the chief asked Lieutenant Ji-hyeok who had called him. Ji-hyeok lied, saying it was a friend of his, someone who held a high-ranking position in the inspection department. That person told him that the chief's corruption would affect someone in the police department, so he advised Ji-hyeok to request a transfer soon. At that point, the chief began to worry. That evening, went to hide all his corrupt goods. Captain Kang and Ji-hyeok were tailing him, but with the eyes of someone who had been in the police force for 10 years, the chief quickly realized he was being followed. Captain Kang also knew that chief had noticed. The captain called someone else to report the chief's direction, while he and Ji-hyeok stopped their car. Then, a delivery vehicle followed the chief to an intersection, where it handed over the tailing task to a taxi. It turned out they were switching cars to avoid being detected by the chief. The taxi followed the chief to an abandoned area. Inside the taxi were Captain Kang and Ji-hyeok. After the chief left the abandoned place, the two went inside to check. They discovered that the items the chief had hidden were all corrupt goods. The two of them took photos of the pile of evidence. This time, it would be hard for the chief to escape his crime. The next day, Captain Kang sent the evidence to the inspection department for the female inspector. However, when they went to the location to check again, they couldn't find anything. Captain Kang directly brought the photos to the chief's office. At that moment, Captain Kang asked the chief who had given him those items. The chief still stubbornly refused to say anything, even going so far as to curse at Captain Kang. Angry, he turned around and walked out. Outside, Ji-hyeok was waiting for him. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok asked whether the chief had revealed who was behind it, but Captain Kang only shook his head. Suddenly, Captain Do-chang appeared and handcuffed Lieutenant Ji-hyeok. He accused Ji-hyeok of being arrested for the crime of raping a minor. In the interrogation room, he showed Ji-hyeok a video recording. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok was seen leading a high school girl into a hotel, and there was also a clear payment receipt. Unexpectedly, Oh Tae-yang had tracked down the girl because he knew Ji-hyeok had once contacted her. Then Oh Tae-yang used money to bribe her. He told the girl to step forward and accuse Ji-hyeok. He and Jo Sun-dae plotted to make Lieutenant Ji-hyeok disappear forever. Back in the interrogation interrogation room, Captain Do-chang gave Ji-hyeok a condition. If he accepted the accusation and quit the police force, he would be released. But if the girl officially filed a complaint, he would go to jail. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok needed time to think. Captain Do-chang put him in a holding cell. To give him that time, Ji-hyeok told Captain Kang that he knew this was the work of his cousin. Tae-yang didn't just want Ji-hyeok in prison, he wanted him dead. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok wanted Captain Kang to help him with a few things. At that moment, the female inspector came to see the chief. She said that the pile of corrupt goods had been taken by someone, but based on the photos, the chief would definitely have to resign. That evening, the chief came to see Captain Kang. He wanted to know whether Captain Kang was the one who had hidden his corrupt goods. Captain Kang asked the chief whether he was now willing to admit his mistake in the case from 5 years ago. The chief couldn't say anything. Captain Kang took out a watch from the pile of the chief's corrupt evidence. At that point, the chief believed that Captain Kang was holding on to his belongings. He finally admitted his mistake in the case from 5 years ago. Captain Kang called Eun-hae out. He told the chief to kneel down and sincerely apologize to the girl. The chief agreed. He knelt down and admitted his mistake in front of her. The girl, overwhelmed with sorrow, cried and ran into the room. After doing that, the chief felt somewhat relieved in his heart. Then Captain Kang also knelt down beside the chief. He admitted that he hadn't taken the chief's corrupt goods, but he had given the chief a list of the items. He made the chief sign a confirmation. He promised he would help the chief recover them. The next day, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok was brought into the interrogation room again. Captain Do-chang asked if he had made a decision. Ji-hyeok told Captain Do-chang to bring the girl in front of him so they could confront each other. He had no choice but to leave angrily because of Ji-hyeok's stubbornness. At that moment, Captain Kang entered the interrogation room. He had investigated and found out that the person who took orders from Tae-yang to frame Ji-hyeok was Jo Sung-dae. Suddenly, a male colleague rushed in and said he wanted to help the two of them catch the culprit. He still held a grudge against Jo Sung-dae. For the time, the man was painfully kicked by him. To catch Jo Sung-dae, the police needed to reopen the case of the prison guard who had taken his own life. There must have been something they missed. The police went to the scene of that case to search for clues. After a while of searching, they found a blood stain. It was Jo Sung-dae's blood from when he had stood and thrown the guard's body down. Elsewhere, Captain Kang went home to see Eun-hae. The girl was acquainted with the high school student who had accused Lieutenant Ji-hyeok. After that, Eun-hae went to meet her friend to ask for the truth. The schoolgirl admitted that she had falsely accused Ji-hyeok because someone had given her a large amount of money. However, the girl was also very cunning. She knew Eun-hae hadn't come just to ask about that. She grabbed Eun-hae's phone and discovered that their conversation had been completely recorded. She quickly deleted the recording, but Eun-hae wasn't that easy to bully. She threatened to tell everything to the girl's boyfriend. He would surely remember what police had done to him. The schoolgirl's boyfriend was the thug Ji-hyeok had beaten up last time. Hearing that, the girl became worried. She agreed to do what Eun-hae asked. After that, Eun-hae took the schoolgirl to withdraw the accusation against Lieutenant Ji-hyeok. Unexpectedly, this was part of a plan by Captain Kang and reporter So-kyung. They knew that the girl would definitely change her mind before reaching the police station, so the two of them went to pick her up in person. They even brought out the audio recording of Eun-hae and the girl. It turned out that Eun-hae hadn't only recorded the conversation on her phone, she had also hidden another recording device. The girl had no choice but to go with them to withdraw the accusation. At that moment, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok had just been released. He immediately went to his cousin's house. Ji-hyeok told Tae-yang that it seemed his cousin no longer wanted him to be a police officer, but Ji-hyeok had to continue in order to catch all the criminals. Tae-yang sarcastically asked the criminal Ji-hyeok was talking about was him. If Ji-hyeok wanted to catch criminals, why didn't he go after the one who killed his father? Ji-hyeok had been the one who saw the killer. This struck a nerve in Ji-hyeok. He angrily said that it was exactly because he couldn't catch the murderer that he had to catch other criminals to make them pay for their sins. Tae-yang stood up and walked away, saying Ji-hyeok could do whatever he wanted and he would wait and see. Ji-hyeok then provoked him, saying that if he really wanted to fight him, he should stop relying on his father's money. Ji-hyeok would be the one to catch all the people behind Tae-yang. Tae-yang became furious, clenched his fist and broke a pen, causing his hand to bleed. At that moment, Captain Kang returned to the office. He said that Ji-hyeok's case had been resolved, and now they had to catch the one who had falsely accused the police. As he spoke, he and his teammates looked over at Captain Do-chang. At that moment, one of Captain Kang's teammates brought in newly collected evidence from the scene of the prison guard's case. There were many clues indicating that case was not simply a suicide. Captain Do-chang had reached a conclusion without a thorough investigation. Captain Kang brought the matter to the chief. The chief intended to stop him, but Captain Kang reminded him of what had happened the previous night, that the chief had admitted his mistake and knelt down. Now, the chief didn't dare say anything more. He had no choice but to let Captain Kang investigate the prison guard's case. To arrest Captain Do-chang, they needed to approach from the bottom up. Captain Kang targeted one of his subordinates, a man who had previously taken part in the investigation of the case. In the interrogation room, Captain Kang said that they had discovered new evidence from the case, and that Do-chang's team had either missed or deliberately concealed it. The subordinate resisted and tried to leave, claiming that he didn't know anything about it. Suddenly, the chief entered the room. He advised the subordinate to speak up if there was anything he needed to say. After the subordinate gave his testimony, along with the collected evidence, Captain Kang requested an arrest warrant for Captain Do-chang from the chief. But Do-chang had already sensed something was wrong and had submitted his resignation. Captain Kang decided he had to find Captain Do-chang. That evening, Captain Do-chang contacted Oh Tae-yang and said that everything had been exposed. Captain Do-chang also knew what Oh Tae-yang would do to people who were no longer useful to him, and he warned Oh Tae-yang that if he didn't want him to do something crazy, then he had better let him live in peace. After saying that, Captain Do-chang hung up. Oh Tae-yang gave a fake smile. People like Captain Do-chang weren't worth paying attention to. The next day, the police received the forensic results of the blood stain found at the scene of the prison guard's case. The blood was confirmed to be Jo Sung-dae's. They also found video footage from a gas station near the scene. The video showed the appearance of the car that Jo Sung-dae often drove. At the same time, the police also identified another car that had appeared at the scene. They suspected that it belonged to Jo Sung-dae's accomplice, a fat prison guard who used to work with the prison guard who had died. That night, the fat prison guard called Jo Sung-dae and said that police had come looking for him, but he had presented an alibi and was let go. However, the police would soon find out that the alibi was fake. The fat guard wanted Jo Sung-dae to give him money to escape abroad. The two agreed to meet. Jo Sung-dae brought the money, but the fat guard didn't notice that he was also carrying a knife behind him. Suddenly, the police appeared. Jo Sung-dae had fallen into their trap. The fat guard was just bait. Seeing the police, the fat guard quickly ran off and disappeared, leaving Jo Sung-dae surrounded. Jo Sung-dae took a police officer hostage. Then, taking advantage of the chaos, he escaped the blockade. Everyone quickly gave chase. A police officer jumped onto a wall and kicked Jo Sung-dae down. He wanted to fight him one-on-one to settle the score from last time, but this fight was never fair. Jo Sung-dae attacked with a knife. The officer was lucky to dodge all the strikes. The officer planned to use a technique to end the fight, but just like last time, he was still kicked down by Jo Sung-dae. After taking care of the officer, Jo Sung-dae continued to run. However, he didn't know he was being watched. His meeting with Oh Tae-yang had been seen. The police found out that the one behind Jo Sung-dae was Oh Tae-yang. The next day, the police obtained video footage showing Jo Sung-dae assaulting the officer. The officer who had been attacked told his subordinate to fake an appendectomy scar for him. That way, he would be seen as a dedicated officer, someone who ignored his surgical wound to pursue criminals to the end. A press conference was held. Jo Sung-dae became the prime suspect in the case of the murdered prison guard. Now that he had also attacked a police officer, he became a top priority fugitive. That night, Jo Sung-dae withdrew money to prepare for his escape. He was picked up by Oh Tae-yang, who drove him away, but they didn't know the police were still closely monitoring them. The police wanted to use Jo Sung-dae as bait to catch Oh Tae-yang. Later, Oh Tae-yang took Jo Sung-dae to the beach. He had prepared a van for Jo Sung-dae to use to escape. Jo Sung-dae got into the van. The subordinate shut the door and immediately locked it. Only then did Jo Sung-dae realize he had been tricked. Oh Tae-yang gave the order to a group of men in black who were waiting inside the van to deal with Jo Sung-dae. Jo Sung-dae fought back with a knife, but he couldn't take on all of them. He managed to kill a few, but the remaining ones beat him up. Suddenly, the door burst open and the police appeared, surrounding the area. Captain Ji-hyeok pointed a gun at the men in black and ordered them to drop their weapons. The whole group was immediately arrested. That way, Jo Sung-dae's life was spared. Oh Tae-yang sat on the side watching. Suddenly, he received a phone call from Lieutenant Ji-hyeok saying that get ready to head back to the station, cousin. At the interrogation room, Captain Kang wanted to know the reason why Oh Tae-yang wanted to get rid of Jo Sung-dae. He asked if he wanted to drag someone down with him. If so, they would help him. At that moment, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok went to the newsroom to meet reporter So-kyung. He wanted to ask her about the audio tape she had received from the former prosecutor. However, So-kyung didn't have any new information. Suddenly, Ji-hyeok went to see Yoo Jung-so because he knew that he was close to Oh Tae-yang and wanted to say hello. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok introduced himself as Oh Tae-yang's cousin, but Yoo Jung-suk said that their relationship wasn't that close. Ji-hyeok smiled and said that if one day Yoo Jung-suk learned of anything wrong that Oh Tae-yang had done, he could feel free to let Ji-hyeok know. It turned out Ji-hyeok said that on purpose to test Yoo Jung-suk's reaction. He knew the two definitely had a shady connection. After hearing that, Yoo Jung-suk's expression changed slightly. That night, he went to meet Oh Tae-yang. Because reporter So-kyung insisted on following him, Yoo Jung-suk couldn't refuse. When they arrived, they sat down to drink together. So-kyung wanted to use alcohol to extract information from Oh Tae-yang. Unexpectedly, whatever she asked, he answered. When So-kyung asked if Oh Tae-yang was the one who killed the schoolgirl and the police officer in the case from 5 years ago, Oh Tae-yang responded with a hint. Even if he had killed the schoolgirl, he wouldn't have dared to kill a police officer. There was someone else who hated the police even more than he did. Oh Tae-yang was referring to Yoo Jung-suk. Because of the police, Yoo Jung-suk's sister had hanged herself, so he deeply resented the police. Seeing that things were about to be exposed, Yoo Jung-suk stood up and led reporter So-kyung away. When they got home, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok was already standing in front of her door waiting. So-kyung invited him in for noodles. Ji-hyeok also wanted to drink some beer. He took a big gulp and finished the whole can. It turned out this time, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok had come just to hang out. While drunk, he unintentionally admitted that he liked So-kyung and wanted to pursue her. After saying it, he got embarrassed, stood up, and tried to leave. But just as he reached the door, he collapsed. The same thing as last time happened again. Once he drank a bit, he completely passed out. Reporter So-kyung had no choice but to let Ji-hyeok sleep over. At that point, she also realized she had developed some feelings for Lieutenant Ji-hyeok. The next day, Ji-hyeok woke up and it was already past noon. He called So-kyung to thank her and say goodbye, then returned to the police station to continue working. At that time, Oh Tae-yang was also summoned for questioning because he was known to be acquainted with Jo Sung-dae. But the police made Oh Tae-yang wait until evening before beginning the interrogation. Team leader Kang wanted to provoke him, believing that only then would the police easily extract information. During the interrogation, Oh Tae-yang claimed not to know Jo Sung-dae, so team leader Kang immediately brought Jo Sung-dae in for confrontation. Team leader Kang asked if he was the one who had taken orders from Oh Tae-yang to kill the prison guard, then followed instructions to stage it as a suicide. Finally, because things didn't go smoothly, Oh Tae-yang had sent someone to eliminate him. Seeing the man who had tried to kill him sitting across from him, Jo Sung-dae became furious and confirmed that Oh Tae-yang was indeed the one who had ordered him. Oh Tae-yang, irritated, stood up and continued to deny knowing Jo Sung-dae. He demanded his lawyer be brought in, and the lawyer quickly secured his release. Before leaving, Oh Tae-yang couldn't resist taunting Ji-hyeok, asking if Ji-hyeok remembered what he had once told him. Ji-hyeok recalled clearly, replying that he would personally arrest him. After returning, Oh Tae-yang went to see Yoo Jung-suk, offering to help him become an elector. In return, Yoo Jung-suk had to do him a favor deal with the nosy reporter So-kyung. Oh Tae-yang despised Ji-hyeok and everyone around him. The next day, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok went to the prison guard's crime scene to gather more clues, preparing to request a reinvestigation. Suddenly, someone attacked him. Oh Tae-yang stabbed Ji-hyeok with a knife, then kicked him down the stairs. He continued kicking, leaving Ji-hyeok unable to fight back, mocking him. Didn't he want to arrest that man so badly? Get up and did it. Unexpectedly, Ji-hyeok grabbed a rock and smashed it into Oh Tae-yang's leg. He then swiftly kicked him, dislodging the knife from his hand. Oh Tae-yang tried to grab it, but Ji-hyeok was faster. Consumed by rage, Ji-hyeok now wanted to finish him off. The two struggled for a while before shoving each other and tumbling outside. Oh Tae-yang gained the upper hand, pinning Ji-hyeok down while gripping the knife. He used all his strength trying to kill Lieutenant Ji-hyeok, but unexpectedly, Ji-hyeok reversed the situation, flipping Oh Tae-yang onto his back. He then plunged the 15 centimeters knife into Oh Tae-yang's stomach. After subduing him, Ji-hyeok pulled out his phone and called an ambulance not for himself but for Oh Tae-yang. He said that Oh Tae-yang had to live so he could pay for his crimes. With that, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok stood up and walked away. The ambulance arrived and took Oh Tae-yang to the hospital. Ji-hyeok was also found in his car not far away. Meanwhile, team leader Kang received the news and rushed to the hospital. His teammates quickly gathered as well. From their accounts, team leader Kang learned that Ji-hyeok had been seriously injured by Oh Tae-yang, filling him with rage. In the hospital room, someone asked why Ji-hyeok's family wasn't there to take care of him. Team leader Kang replied sadly that he had no family left. A teammate then said, "Didn't we his family, even without blood relatives, having comrades like them was some comfort comfort. By then, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok had regained consciousness. Team leader Kang was overjoyed, but also somewhat disappointed because his request to superiors for Oh Tae-yang's arrest had been denied. Ji-hyeok said that someone was backing him. That person was Yoo Jung-suk, along with Commissioner. After that, Captain Kang went to the news office to find Yoo Jung-suk. He took out evidence proving their acquaintance to threaten him. He said that he only wanted to catch the one who harmed his teammate, so he didn't want to make things bigger. If Yoo Jung-suk knew anything about Oh Tae-yang, he should reveal it before Captain Kang started investigating him as well. Yoo Jung-suk angrily shouted that the police were secretly following a journalist, and now they were even threatening one. He said he couldn't help and asked Captain Kang to leave. Reporter So-kyung was also implicated. Yoo Jung-suk said that not everyone could enter the newsroom without a search warrant. The police had no right to come in. After saying that, Yoo Jung-suk left in anger, while Captain Kang just smiled and stayed behind. Later, Yoo Jung-suk called Oh Tae-yang to ask about the situation. Oh Tae-yang told him not to worry, that this wouldn't affect him. Oh Tae-yang had told the police that it was just a family dispute and reassured Yoo Jung-suk to just focus on his own work. Hearing those words, Yoo Jung-suk angrily hung up the phone. He didn't realize that Oh Tae-yang was extremely cunning. He had even cooperated with Yoo Jung-suk's enemy, the former chief prosecutor. At that point, Oh Tae-yang asked the former chief prosecutor what his motive was in helping him. The former chief prosecutor didn't hide anything and said that the person who had put him in prison must also experience what that felt like. At that moment, Captain Kang's police team was being investigated by the Internal Affairs Department. The officers were furious because they had done nothing wrong. They wondered why criminals weren't being pursued while people were digging into others' private lives. Unexpectedly, the Internal Affairs team even arrested Eun-hye for interrogation, falsely accusing team leader Kang of having an improper relationship with her, claiming that was why he let her stay at his place. Enraged, team leader Kang stormed into the interrogation room with a baton, demanding, said that what the hell did they talking about? He was about to strike the investigators when, fortunately, the police chief arrived just in time to stop him, preventing a major incident. The chief had truly changed. Now he stood firmly on team leader Kang's side. He confronted the internal affairs officers, asking how they dared interrogate people and spread false accusations. He added that they had even slandered a minor's reputation. The chief told them to focus on their actual duties instead of meddling in others' private lives. The investigators fell silent, unable to respond. Afterward, the chief escorted team leader Kang and Eun-hye out. Before they left, he handed Kang some money, saying that using that to buy her something she liked. Doing this made the chief feel lighter, easing his guilt from the past. The next morning, team leader Kang's squad strategized to capture Oh Tae-yang. They couldn't let him run wild any longer. However, Oh Tae-yang's powerful backers had helped him erase all incriminating evidence. Then, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok came up with an idea. They could start by investigating Oh Tae-yang's accomplices. Perhaps team leader Gu-kyung was helping him cover up the evidence. One of Gu-kyung's subordinates overheard their plan and urgently warned his boss to hide before Ji-hyeok uncovered the truth. It turned out that team leader Gu-kyung was the one who had killed his colleague in the case 5 years ago, and he had perfectly deceived everyone. Later, he used the evidence his colleague had gathered in that case to blackmail Oh Tae-yang. It was he who had conspired with Oh Tae-yang to fabricate the crime scene and plant false evidence. At that moment, Ji-hyeok and team leader Kang arrived at a scrapyard. They had tracked down information about the car Oh Tae-yang drove on the night of the murder 5 years ago, now destroyed. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok knew someone in the police department had helped Oh Tae-yang with this. He showed a photo of team leader Gu-kyung to the employee, asking if he was the one who brought the car in. The employee shook his head, saying the person who delivered the car seemed to be a police officer whose obituary had been in the papers a few days later. Ji-hyeok deduced that the deceased officer might have conspired with team leader Gu-kyung to hide Oh Tae-yang's criminal evidence, then used it to blackmail him. However, due to an unfair split of the money, the officer had planned to expose the evidence, so team leader Gu-kyung killed him to silence him. Team leader Kang insisted the deceased officer wasn't that kind of person. He might have hidden the evidence somewhere before being murdered before he could reveal it. The moment this thought crossed his mind, team leader Kang immediately remembered a place, the evidence storage room. The police headed there at once. Indeed, around 5 years ago, this police officer had brought some evidence to the storage facility. These were pieces of evidence that had been dismissed by the court, but if transferred to the prosecution, they could still be used. The evidence included hair and blood containing the victim's DNA found in Oh Tae-yang's car. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok proposed 2 hypotheses. 1, that Oh Tae-yang killed both the schoolgirl and the police officer. 2, that Oh Tae-yang only killed the schoolgirl, while the one who killed the police officer was was Captain Do-chang. It was possible that he had been discovered taking bribes from Do-chang and killed his colleague to silence him. On another front, reporter So-kyung went to the prosecutor's office. She began investigating the former chief prosecutor to find out why he had gone to prison, but the current prosecutor did not want to tell her. He only provided the schedule of the former chief prosecutor from the time right before his arrest. So-kyung accidentally discovered the name of the police officer who died in the case from 5 years ago. His name appeared in the former chief prosecutor's meeting schedule right before the incident occurred. After returning to her office, So-kyung started her investigation. Unexpectedly, she found out that the deceased police officer had once listened to Bible sermons with the former chief prosecutor, delivered by a pastor at a church. That pastor also disappeared after the case 5 years ago. The scene of the police officer's murder was also in that same church. This was likely not a coincidence. The next day, while Do-chang had just finished his meal, the police secretly collected his saliva sample for DNA testing. They wanted to determine whose blood and hair had been found in his car. They called to report back to Captain Kang, who told them to have the test done as soon as possible. At that time, Ji-hyeok returned. He had found a new clue related to the night of the police officer's murder 5 years ago. Team leader Go-kung and the deceased police officer had stopped at a roadside shop to buy cigarettes. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok found Go-kung's payment records near that location, while Do-chang had an alibi for that day. Mounting evidence indicated team leader Go-kung was the perpetrator who killed that police officer. At this point, reporter So-kyung remembered Do-chang's words that Yoo Jung-suk deeply hated the police because they had driven his sister to commit suicide. So-kyung found a newspaper article about that case. Yoo Jung-suk's sister had been sexually assaulted, but after the police came to investigate, she suddenly hanged herself. So-kyung knew there were hidden aspects to this story, so she called Lieutenant Ji-hyeok to check the background of Yoo Jung-suk's sister. After confirming the relationship between these two individuals, So-kyung wanted to take Yoo Jung-suk to a specific place, the church where the police officer's murder occurred. There, the two met the former chief prosecutor. So-kyung then revealed everything she had uncovered, believing both men were using her to undermine each other. Yoo Jung-suk wanted to help the assemblyman become minister to pressure the former chief prosecutor into prison, knowing he had been the superior of the police officer who sexually assaulted his sister. The former chief prosecutor had even taken that officer under his wing. Yoo Jung-suk harbored such hatred that he planned to collaborate with the assemblyman for revenge. Former chief prosecutor also exploited So-kyung to bring to light the wrongful conviction case from 5 years earlier, aiming to discredit both the assemblyman and Yoo Jung-suk. However, neither side had yet achieved victory. Because the person they wanted to manipulate, reporter So-kyung, was very intelligent. When Yoo Jung-suk heard So-kyung's analysis, he approached the former chief prosecutor and said it seemed the prosecutor had thoroughly investigated him. He asked if that meant the prosecutor already knew he wasn't the murderer. The former chief prosecutor confirmed he had known Yoo Jung-suk since childhood. Regarding the wrongfully executed prisoner's case, he hadn't investigated who killed who, but rather who was responsible for that prisoner's execution. Wasn't it the journalists who sensationalized the case, he said, along with the assemblyman and minister who signed death warrants for murder convicts? Having said this, the former prosecutor left. Yoo Jung-suk then turned to So-kyung, remarking that she seemed confident in her deductions. So-kyung replied she wasn't confident about anything, she only believed in justice and truth, yet still couldn't save that executed prisoner. The only thing she could do now was restore his honor. If she could accomplish that, Yoo Jung-suk said, her name would be make front page news. He encouraged her to keep trying, promising he wouldn't interfere. His confidence stemmed from not being the perpetrator in the 5-year-old case. Yoo Jung-suk departed, leaving So-kyung alone outside the church. Later, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok and team leader Kang came to pick her up. So-kyung revealed that Jo Sung-dae's older brother was the one who had raped Yoo Jung-suk's sister 5 years ago, the original source of this tragic story. After that, the three of them went to the detention center to find Jo Sung-dae. They asked him if he knew where his older brother was. Unexpectedly, Jo Sung-dae replied that his brother had changed his name and that he was now a pastor at church, the same pastor who had disappeared during the case 5 years ago. But that pastor had already been dead for a long time. At that moment, the police received a photo. Unexpectedly, someone had already found a church vehicle 5 years ago. It had appeared 30 kilometers away from the church. The vehicle had been completely burned to destroy evidence. The person who did that was Yoo Jung-suk. He wanted to erase all traces because he was the one who had killed the pastor to take revenge for his sister. The police also went to the location and found the vehicle. Captain Kang ordered a search of the surrounding area. Even if they they had to dig up every inch of land. They had to find the pastor's body. After some time digging, one of the officers suddenly found something that looked like human bones, but it turned out to be ginseng. Everyone was tired, so they roasted the ginseng and ate it. The next morning, the whole team discovered the skeleton. So-kyung received the news and hurriedly asked for permission to leave. This made Yoo Jung-sok suspicious. That evening, Captain Go-kyung called Captain Kang. He used Eun-hae as a threat. Captain Kang warned him not to hurt anyone else. Captain Go-kyung provoked him, then hung up the phone. However, he did not touch Eun-hae. He had only pretended to come by something to observe the girl. But Captain Go-kyung did not expect that Eun-hae recognized him at that moment. She remembered that it was him who had placed the victim's hair in her father's car in the case from 5 years ago. Eun-hae ran after Captain Go-kyung, but he got in his car and drove away. At that moment, Eun-hae had another epileptic seizure. When Captain Kang returned home and learned what had happened, he was extremely worried because this seizure caused temporary blindness in one of her eyes. His younger sister told Captain Kang that if the seizures continued, Eun-hae could go permanently blind. The next day, Captain Kang and his colleagues went to the chief's office. He reported about the new case in the series of cases from 5 years ago. When the chief heard the name of the new suspect, he was shocked. It turned out to be Yoo Jung-sok, the commissioner's younger brother. He asked why they always like to go after powerful people. Suddenly, a colleague rushed in. He reported that they had gathered enough evidence and had obtained a warrant to arrest Oh Tae-yang. When Ji-hyeok and Captain Kang arrived at his house, they discovered that Oh Tae-yang had already escaped without anyone noticing. The police did everything they could, from tracking to surveilling his residence. They also checked the places Oh Tae-yang often visited, with the sole goal of bringing him to justice. After a period of surveillance, they finally found a lead. The entire team immediately set out to arrest him. Captain Kang also received information that Oh Tae-yang had appeared at the cafe he often visited. Captain Kang couldn't understand why, knowing he was being pursued, Oh Tae-yang would still go to that cafe. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok immediately understood the situation. He believed that Oh Tae-yang was trying to lure them into a trap. At that moment, Oh Tae-yang knew the police were tracking him, but he still went to see the commissioner, who had now become the Minister of Justice. Oh Tae-yang wanted to drag someone down with him, or perhaps he was trying to rely on a powerful force. At that moment, Ji-hyeok and Captain Kang also arrived at the place where Oh Tae-yang was hiding. He calmly stepped out from inside. Captain Kang helped him put on the handcuffs and led him away. Suddenly, he noticed the gaze of the minister watching from above. Despite being handcuffed, Oh Tae-yang still wore a triumphant smile. In the interrogation room, Captain Kang forced Oh Tae-yang to admit all his wrongdoings, from committing murder and ordering the police to stage a fake crime scene, to causing an innocent person to be wrongly convicted, and indirectly ordering someone to kill the prison officer, then disguising it as a suicide case. Oh Tae-yang calmly responded that weren't those the kinds of things police usually did anyway. The people who helped him were also police officers, and in his eyes, all police were useless the same. At that moment, Ji-hyeok suggested that since he hated the police so much, why not take advantage of this situation to expose them? Oh Tae-yang admitted that he was the one behind everything, then said that the police were just a bunch of incompetents. Ji-hyeok's manipulation tactics didn't work on him. Oh Tae-yang still showed no fear. He raised his voice and said he would consider what Ji-hyeok had said, then demanded to call his lawyer. Captain Kang and Lieutenant Ji-hyeok had no choice but to leave the room. At that moment, Captain Kang was invited by the chief to a meal. Unexpectedly, it was a farewell meal. The chief was about to be suspended from duty. Captain Kang believed it was because he had investigated high-ranking officials that the chief had been implicated, which made him feel deeply regretful. The chief encouraged everyone to do their best to catch all those who had pushed him into that situation. The determination in Captain Kang's heart grew even stronger. Even high-ranking officials had to pay the price for their crimes. That evening, the police brought in a thug to the station for assaulting someone. But what Captain Kang truly aimed for was to arrest the person who had incited the violence. The thug stubbornly refused to confess, and even threatened that the person backing him was extremely powerful. Captain Kang didn't have anyone supporting him, but he threatened the thug by saying that all of his friends were well-known police officers. If the thug wanted to live in Incheon while going against Captain Kang, there would be eyes on him every single day. In the end, the thug was forced to reveal who was backing him. Early the next morning, Captain Kang and his colleagues went to arrest that person. He turned out to be the secretary of the Minister of Justice. This secretary not only incited violence, but through the documents the female inspector had given to Captain Kang, he also discovered that the secretary had committed multiple crimes, such as bribery and corruption involving the police. The secretary was quickly escorted away by the police. Outside, a large number of reporters were already waiting. The article made the front page. Some of the team members proudly said that they had finally gotten to someone connected to the minister. One teammate worried that the minister would make a big deal out of it, but unexpectedly, after reading the news, the minister himself was just as worried. He called Yoo Jung-suk to discuss a strategy. Yoo Jung-suk told him to put all the blame on the secretary and simply claim that he knew nothing. Suddenly, the minister received a call from a journalist. They wanted to interview him directly because the matter involved his secretary. At that time, the minister repeated exactly what Yoo Jung-suk had told him. He shifted all the responsibility onto the secretary. He even promised the public that he would not interfere with the police investigation. A high-ranking officer from the National Police Agency also watched the minister's interview. He told his subordinates that if the minister would not interfere with the police investigation, then they shouldn't interfere either, because if either side acted recklessly first, all eyes of the South Korean public would turn to that side. Upon hearing this, one of the subordinates became worried. He said that this was no different than telling him to go out and die in someone else's place, since he was the one who had been acting under orders from the high-ranking official. All the evidence now pointed to him. The subordinate returned to his office angrily and scolded the female inspector. He knew she was the one who had leaked the secretary's information to the police, which had caused even those who were uninvolved, like himself, to get dragged into the mess. The female inspector said that the one with power would win, and if he had no power, there was no reason to feel bad about it. That evening, the minister received a phone call from Oh Tae-yang. Oh Tae-yang had watched the minister's interview and realized the minister would now allow the police investigation to proceed and would no longer protect him. The minister also took this opportunity to turn his back on him, telling Oh Tae-yang to take care of himself. Oh Tae-yang threatened that he would drag the minister and Yoo Jung-suk down with him, but the call was already cut off on the other end. The next day, prosecutor's office called the police station. They told Captain Kang to hand over the minister's secretary, who had just been arrested. Captain Kang set a condition for the prosecution. He wanted to obtain a search warrant first, and only then would he turn over the secretary, so they could deal with him as they saw fit. After that, Captain Kang and his colleagues brought a search warrant to a news agency. They wanted to search Yoo Jung-suk's workplace on suspicion that he was involved in a murder case. The reporters working there tried their best to stop them. At that moment, Yoo Jung-suk appeared and told them to let the police search. The police seized all the documents on Yoo Jung-suk's desk for investigation. After the police left, So Kyung, representing everyone, questioned Yoo Jung-suk. She asked him to explain why their daily news office had to suffer such humiliation because of him. Unexpectedly, Yoo Jung-suk admitted that he only killed those who needed to be killed. This shocked everyone. On the night of the murder case 5 years ago, Yoo Jung-suk went to find the pastor because he knew the pastor was the police officer who had sexually assaulted his sister. The pastor denied it and pretended not to know Yoo Jung-suk, but he didn't know that Yoo Jung-suk was hiding a knife behind his back. Yoo Jung-suk forced the pastor out of the car and made him confess to the horrible thing he had done. At that moment, the pastor grabbed the knife and held Yoo Jung-suk hostage. He pushed Yoo Jung-suk to the ground and even mocked him, saying that if his sister hadn't lifted her skirt in front of him, he wouldn't have done anything to her. After saying that, the pastor ignored Yoo Jung-suk and tried to get back in the car to leave. Taking advantage of the pastor's distraction, Yoo Jung-suk grabbed a rock and repeatedly struck him on the head. After that, he stuffed the dead pastor into the trunk of the car. Unfortunately, the entire act had been recorded by the dashcam of the vehicle parked across from them. Yoo Jung-suk intended to go to that car to destroy the evidence, but unexpectedly, a police officer ran out and said he had just heard sounds of a fight nearby. The police officer noticed that Yoo Jung-suk was acting suspiciously and saw blood on his hands, so he wanted to search his car. However, just as the officer walked past, Yoo Jung-suk struck him again with the rock. The officer collapsed to the ground, lying motionless. At that moment, Yoo Jung-suk heard another person approaching. He didn't have time to retrieve the dashcam from the other car. He only managed to take the pastor's body to dispose of it. The police officer, whose fate was unknown, remained lying still on the ground. Back to the present, the police had recovered data from Yoo Jung-suk's computer. It turned out that he had detailed information about every case the police investigated, but on the day the pastor's remains were found, Yoo Jung-suk deleted everything. It seemed he was afraid something might be exposed. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok shared his theory. He believed that Captain Do-chang might have evidence related to the murder of the pastor, and they needed to arrest him to obtain that evidence. On the other side, Captain Do-chang was on the phone with Oh Tae-yang. He told Oh Tae-yang to turn himself in and admit to inciting the murder, while he would find a way to ask the minister to help save him. But Oh Tae-yang knew the minister would no longer longer help him. He also didn't want to go to prison like that, especially since Ji-hyeok, his cousin, would laugh at him. Suddenly, Captain Do-chang was ambushed. Gangsters brought him to Do-yang. Captain Do-chang begged Do-yang to spare his life. He had something that might make the minister reconsider helping Do-yang. It turned out the dash cam that had recorded Yoo Jung-suk killing both the pastor and the police officer was in Captain Do-chang's possession. Because of that, he was able to save his life from Do-yang. On the other side, Yoo Jung-suk held a meeting at the newsroom. He wanted to take a temporary leave so that others wouldn't be affected. He also encouraged everyone to work hard until he returned. As Yoo Jung-suk was leaving, So-kyung tried to chase after him to ask why he was doing this. Yoo Jung-suk admitted that he killed the pastor because the man had harmed his sister, and that the police officer who died was simply collateral damage because he had accidentally witnessed the murder. So-kyung was deeply upset, knowing that Yoo Jung-suk had his own suffering, but murder was still murder. At that moment, Do-yang received a video recording that proved Yoo Jung-suk was the one who killed both pastor and the police officer. He was extremely excited, thinking that with this evidence, the minister would be very eager to help him. In reality, Captain Do-chang still had some fear of the minister. Otherwise, that tape would have been in the minister's hands long ago. While Captain Do-chang was busy talking to Do-yang, the police located his car. They set up an ambush and informed Lieutenant Ji-hyeok. Ji-hyeok wanted to leave the police station as quickly as possible to get to the scene. Unexpectedly, Ji-hyeok ran into someone familiar. It was the suspect in his father's murder case. Emotions surged violently inside Lieutenant Ji-hyeok. Back then, because he had failed to identify the killer, the man had escaped. His mother later fell into depression and ended her own life. Since then, he had become an orphan. After that, Ji-hyeok went to pick up Captain Kang, and the two of them rushed to the ambush location. On the other side, Captain Do-chang had already shown himself. The police ordered him to surrender quickly. One officer even said that out of respect for him as a fellow officer, they would go easy on him, but Captain Do-chang stubbornly tried to escape. At that moment, Captain Kang and Ji-hyeok also arrived. They drove their car and joined in the intense chase. Suddenly, the young officer in their team sped up and managed to catch up with Captain Do-chang. Do-chang knocked him down, but the others surrounded him right after. Captain Do-chang then took the young officer hostage. Ji-hyeok pulled out his gun and threatened him. When Do-chang looked into Ji-hyeok's eyes, he realized Ji-hyeok wasn't bluffing. He let go of the young officer and raised both hands above his head. After that, the police brought him back to the station. In the interrogation room, Captain Do-chang admitted that he had helped Do-yang fabricate evidence in the case from 5 years ago. He also admitted to faking evidence in the prison warden's case, but insisted that it ended there. Captain Do-chang said he had never killed anyone. He even promised to come forward and confess that the wrongful conviction of the death row inmate had been fabricated by him. Now, Captain Kang had one question then: who killed the police officer in the case from 5 years ago? Captain Do-chang seemed surprised, as he thought Yoo Jung-suk would have already confessed everything by now. If not, it could affect his older brother, the Minister of Justice. Unexpectedly, Captain Do-chang gave Captain Kang a suggestion for how to arrest Yoo Jung-suk, appeal to his conscience. At that moment, Do-yang went to meet Yoo Jung-suk. He brought along the evidence of Yoo Jung-suk's murders. He proposed that they could work together, or they could both go down together. Yoo Jung-suk said he was already working on a plan. Do-yang only needed to sit still and wait. That evening, Yoo Jung-suk went to meet his older brother, the minister. The minister expressed his intention to help, but Yoo Jung-suk refused. He even claimed that this time, his plan would take him to a position higher than that of the minister. His older brother thought he was joking, so he replied cheerfully. The next day, Captain Kang's team ran into more trouble. The evidence they submitted to the prosecutor's office was not sufficient to obtain an arrest warrant for Yoo Jung-suk. They could only summon him to the station for questioning. It was unexpected that they would face such a major obstacle so close to the final step. Suddenly, Lieutenant Ji-hyeok received a phone call from reporter So-kyung. She said that Yoo Jung-suk had confessed everything to her, that he was the one who killed the pastor and the police officer 5 years ago. At that time, Yoo Jung-suk also arrived at police station in response to the summons. In the interrogation room, Yoo Jung-suk told the police that he would expose his crimes in the newspaper. One last time as a journalist, Yoo Jung-suk wanted to protect the truth, and Captain Kang trusted him and released him. At that moment, So-kyung received a phone call. Yoo Jung-suk wanted her to come to the office for a favor. So-kyung admitted that she had told the police about Yoo Jung-suk's confession, but he didn't blame her. When reporter So-kyung arrived at the newsroom, Yoo Jung-suk was cheerful. He wanted her to write down everything from the fact that the defendant in the case from 5 years ago was innocent, that the real culprit was Do-yang, to the fact that Yoo Jung-suk himself was the one who killed 2 people. So-kyung had always seen Yoo Jung-suk as a role model in her career pursuit. Only now did she realize that she truly hadn't misjudged him. The next morning, the news was all over the headlines, shocking everyone. The police station even held a small celebration for their achievement. The chief returned and praised Captain Kang enthusiastically. Meanwhile, Yoo Jung-suk visited his sister's grave one last time. He also bowed before the grave of the wrongfully executed inmate from the case 5 years ago. In the end, Yoo Jung-suk acknowledged his responsibility. After that, he called Oh Tae-yang and said that he wanted to take the blame on Oh Tae-yang's behalf. He already had fake evidence prepared. Oh Tae-yang asked why he would do that. Yoo Jung-suk said it was because he didn't want the video of him killing someone to be made public. It was the most shameful thing in his life. Oh Tae-yang agreed to the arrangement. The two set a time to meet and exchange the evidence. As soon as Oh Tae-yang hung up, Yoo Jung-suk called So-kyung. He told her that he was going to meet Oh Tae-yang, but had a bad feeling, so he wanted her to inform the police to follow him for protection, and also to arrest the evil Oh Tae-yang and put him in prison. So-kyung didn't have time to understand before Yoo Jung-suk quickly ended call. The police received the report and gathered at the designated location. Reporter So-kyung also hurried to the location. At that time, Yoo Jung-suk and Oh Tae-yang arrived at the meeting spot. It was the bridge where the body of the murdered schoolgirl had been disposed of 5 years ago. Oh Tae-yang asked about the fake evidence that Yoo Jung-suk had paired, but there was no fake evidence at all. Suddenly, Yoo Jung-suk lunged forward and choked Oh Tae-yang. He suffocated and collapsed to the ground. When he looked around again, he couldn't see Yoo Jung-suk anymore. He hadn't expected that Yoo Jung-suk had jumped off the bridge and taken his own life. At that moment, the police also arrived at the scene. What they saw made them believe that Oh Tae-yang was the one who killed Yoo Jung-suk. It turned out this was the final gift Yoo Jung-suk had left for the police. Oh Tae-yang didn't even bother to argue because he knew no one would believe him. In the end, Ji-hyeok finally got to put handcuffs on his evil cousin with his own hands. The reason Yoo Jung-suk took his own life was because the death row inmate from 5 years ago had already paid the price for the crime he didn't commit. Therefore, Yoo Jung-suk couldn't use that case to send Oh Tae-yang to prison. As for Oh Tae-yang's act of instigating Jo Sun-dae to kill the prison officer, that wasn't enough to make Oh Tae-yang pay a deserving price either. But if Oh Tae-yang killed one more person, then he would certainly have to bear the full consequences of what he had done. Interrogation room, Oh Tae-yang firmly denied being framed. The situation resembled that of the inmate from the case 5 years ago. Captain Kang became furious and shouted at him, demanding what right he had to even mention that man. Ji-hyeok advised Captain Kang to calm down, since at this point, Oh Tae-yang was just waiting for the verdict. Outside, Captain Kang asked Ji-hyeok if he also knew that this was a suicide case. Yoo Jung-suk actually wanted Oh Tae-yang to pay the price, while he himself died as an honest journalist. Ji-hyeok admitted that he knew about it. At that moment, Captain Kang said that even though he knew Oh Tae-yang didn't kill anyone this time, he wouldn't investigate further. This was the price he deserved to pay. At that time, Oh Tae-yang was brought to the prosecutor's office. The person in charge was the prosecutor who had handled the retrial of the wrongfully convicted prisoner. Oh Tae-yang tried to persuade him, reminding him that he had helped him avoid being a suspect back then, and asked him to help again this time. The prosecutor laughed and said he had to ask his superior. Unexpectedly, the former chief prosecutor had been reinstated. Oh Tae-yang thought he could turn things around, but the chief prosecutor pretended not to know him. It was true that the chief prosecutor had once clashed with the minister and his younger brother, Yoo Jung-suk, but in reality, they were all his juniors. Before he died, Yoo Jung-suk had visited the chief prosecutor once, asking him to help make sure Oh Tae-yang paid a heavy price. That day, the trial of Oh Tae-yang was held. His defense lawyer presented the video that showed Yoo Jung-suk committing murder. The lawyer said that it was because Yoo Jung-suk wanted to retrieve this evidence that he fought with Oh Tae-yang, and later, fearing exposure, Yoo Jung-suk took his own life. Although this was a convincing piece of evidence, with all the evidence that Captain Kang had collected from the various cases, and the prosecutor who handled the retrial of the wrongfully convicted prisoner also admitting his mistake, Oh Tae-yang was ultimately sentenced to life imprisonment. Everyone was satisfied with the judge's decision. That evening, Captain Kang brought out some alcohol. He wanted to drink with Lieutenant Ji-hyeok to celebrate that everything had come to an end. But Ji-hyeok still had a question. Where did Oh Tae-yang get the video shown at the trial today? Ji-hyeok noticed a suspicious detail in the video. Yoo Jung-suk only hit the police officer's head with a rock, but during the autopsy, they had found a stab wound in the abdomen. So the case of the police officer from 5 years ago might not have ended there, and Yoo Jung-suk might not have been the real killer. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok didn't tell anyone and decided to investigate on his own. That night, Ji-hyeok broke into Captain Do-chang's house. He accessed Do-chang's computer and stole some information. After he recovered the video footage, the truth became clear. At the time of the incident 5 years ago, Yoo Jung-suk was not the one who killed the police officer. It was actually Captain Do-chang. The police officer had discovered that Do-chang had accepted bribes from Oh Tae-yang to cover up the murder case of the female student whose body was dumped from the bridge. So he tried to persuade Captain Do-chang to turn himself in. At first, Do-chang wavered a little, but when he found the police officer severely injured after being attacked, instead of calling for an ambulance, he intended to kill him to silence the witness. Returning to the present, after watching the video, everyone was shocked. Reporter So Kyung went to meet the chief prosecutor to discuss how Yoo Jung-suk had taken the blame and died unjustly. Had the truth been investigated earlier, Yoo Jung-suk wouldn't have had to die. The police were furious upon learning this. No one had expected team leader Gu-kung to turn on his own comrades. When Gu-kung returned home, he discovered his room had been ransacked. He immediately called his subordinate, but was met with anger instead. The subordinate said he never imagined Gu-kung could be so ruthless toward a colleague and cut ties, vowing to help hunt him down. Enraged, Gu-kung decided to grab his money and flee, but team leader Kang was already waiting outside. Gu-kung bolted. With Kang in pursuit, Kang managed to grab his leg, but Gu-kung struck him and escaped. As Kang searched everywhere, Gu-kung ambushed him from a hiding spot, pulling out a knife and stabbing Kang once. He screamed, "Why wouldn't you just leave me alone? Let me live." Kang retorted angrily, "A disgrace like you didn't deserve mercy, even in death." Just as Gu-kung moved to finish Kang off, a gunshot rang out. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok had fired. This was the third time he'd drawn his weapon, but the first time he'd actually shot. Because of this, Ji-hyeok was summoned for interrogation by the female inspector. While it was clearly an emergency, the police still had to assess the situation carefully. Lieutenant Ji-hyeok didn't argue and admitted his mistake right away. The chief was worried that Ji-hyeok would have his police badge taken away, and then he wouldn't know what to do with his life. Captain Kang thought the chief was worrying too much for someone as rich as Ji-hyeok. However, he was still determined to ask the chief to find a way to protect Ji-hyeok. He said that a skilled police officer like Ji-hyeok couldn't just be dismissed. The chief used perfume to try to bribe the female inspector, but she refused to accept it. However, even though she said that, they were on the same side. The female inspector knew how hard Ji-hyeok had worked on the case, so she accepted the gift to make the chief happy. At that moment, Captain Kang came to ask Ji-hyeok if he had no more doubts now, but Lieutenant Ji-hyeok still had one lingering question: who had killed his father? Lieutenant Ji-hyeok then went to meet the elderly inmate he had spoken to before and asked why he had recognized him. The elderly inmate, who didn't have much longer to live, regretted his past crimes and admitted that he had killed Ji-hyeok's father. After hearing this, Ji-hyeok didn't feel hatred, but instead felt relieved. His life started to regain some joy, so he directly confessed his feelings to reporter So Kyung. Meanwhile, Captain Kang's family reunited happily, and this was also the final scene of the drama. Thank you all for your attention and for following along. Goodbye and see you again.